Oh, this is doubly sad as I contemplate the release of this edition of Happy Times and Places. Siobhan Gallichan, the guest who you will hear choosing and eulogising the three doctors, sadly died just before Christmas 2024. Her death was a shock to us all and has left a massive hole in fandom, a fandom that Siobhan was part of for a very, very long time indeed, right from the early days. And she was never happier than when she was podcasting. Listen to The Flashing Blade if you can, that extensive and prolific set of podcasts. When she was attending Doctor Who conventions, mixing with fans and mates, partaking in all the fun. And, of course, being a devil of a William Hartnell impersonator. I'm not sure Siobhan was always the happiest herself. I think life was difficult in many, many ways. But I know that when happiness did come, it was never too far away when she was talking about her favourite thing with her favourite people, Doctor Who and Doctor Who fans. So I hope that this serves as a reminder of her in, well, let's say, happier times and places. R.I.P. Siobhan. Siobhan and I are talking here about the three doctors, and one of the cast members of that story is Patricia Pryor, Pat. And Pat is referred to in the present tense throughout this broadcast because she too was still alive when it was recorded but has sadly passed away since. I interviewed Pat and her husband Rex, shock horror, she was married to Dr. Tyler, for my Who's Round podcast, but we stayed in touch even after Rex had passed away. She always had a plate of biscuits and a cup of tea ready whenever I moseyed down to Addleston and popped in to say hello, and we kept in touch at Christmas as well, and she often chose a Doctor Who-themed Christmas card to send me especially, and I was always grateful for that and always happy to hear from her. So I hope what follows is a testament to both of them and what they brought in different ways to the world of Doctor Who, which is, of course, for many of us, a happy time and place. Welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Haydock, watch a Doctor Who story chosen by a friend of mine. I then commentate along, drop in facts and information and opinion, and also try to guess what my special guest's favourite thing about each episode might be.
Hello there, I'm Siobhan Gallichan, and I've chosen The Three Doctors. Right, that's the short intro out of the way for the other episodes. Don't worry if you haven't heard about me, I haven't either. I've been a fan, I've been aware of Doctor Who all my life, but I've been a fan for all of my adult life. First memories, Day of the Daleks. I've been a long time in fandom. Scarily long, actually. And I can tell you some stories. And sorry, if you're watching this on YouTube, you're probably seeing cats. It happens. Okay. I've been podcasting for donkey's years. I've done slightly less interviews than Toby. I started off with Staggering Stories, then had 2 stints on the DW Who cast, and of course my own show, The Flashing Blade. More about that a little bit later on. And I'm told I do a really hot Bill Hartnell, but I'll leave that to other people to decide. So, let's get on with it then, shall we?
Hello everybody, I am recording this in the run-up to Doctor Who's 59th birthday. Now, patrons will get it probably just after, and those of you who are in the less chronologically planned great outdoors of Podcastville, you probably get this in the middle of the year. But seeing this is the 10th anniversary story that we're watching, that was actually broadcast at the end of the 9th year of the show and really only snuck into the 10th year. It's much closer to the 9th anniversary than it is to the 10th. I'm kind of easy with this going out whenever it does. I don't know at the moment because patrons are about 6 months ahead. I don't say that to advertise the Patreon, although I'm told I should do it more at the top of the show. But anyway, listen, that's not why I mention that. I just mention it because I am feeling the need to do something, because I've not really done this year on the 59th year a release that marks 2 years of these podcasts and 59 years of Doctor Who. So the fact that this is going out probably the week after the 59th anniversary for Patreon people is kind of suitably just missing the anniversary, but kind of it's in the air. I'll record it just before. It'll go out just after the 10th anniversary story. I'm sure Stephen Moffat wrote an editorial for Doctor Who magazine where he kind of pointed out it wasn't really the 10th anniversary story, but of course it's such a brilliant idea, and I'm thrilled. Now one could say it's been done almost too often, but can you imagine then? 9-10 years into the show, 10 years. I mean, that's nothing. The new series is older than that, and going. But television was a very different landscape then, and to bring back the 3 Doctors, which, as we will discover, is a path not easily trod, thanks to circumstance and. Thanks to circumstance will do. Let's just blame circumstance. We don't want this metaphor to get overcrowded, otherwise the rest of it will have to film its scenes on a single day and be ineffectively beamed onto a monitor with loads of stuff reflected on it. And Siobhan Gallichan, I knew would undersell herself, a legend in Doctor Who fandom and indeed podcasting, a patron of these, whatever these are, so somebody to whom I'm grateful as a supporter of these efforts of mine. So somebody I'm very pleased has contributed her thoughts on a story that has gone up and down, in my opinion, I have to say. I first saw this when it was repeated as part of the 5 Faces of Doctor Who, which when it was a sort of bonus, because we had the 3rd Doctor story, Carnival of Monsters, and then they showed the 3 Doctors as well. I didn't know that actually then ended up costing us Mask of Mandragora, and I was so annoyed that they repeated Logopolis for Tom Baker, because I'd seen Logopolis not that long ago, and I wanted, something with mummies or gothic horror or whatever. Mask of Mandragora would have been interesting, but it's one of Hinchcliffe's favourites. It was a story Hinchcliffe was particularly happy with. Why am I talking about that when I could be firing up the 3 Doctors? Because I go on little segues and little jaunts. But Siobhan is a delightful person who has done so much broadcasting in the fan world, and does indeed do a mean William Hartnell, and probably does a slightly better William Hartnell than William Hartnell does in this story, which I'm now about to fire up. I mean, typically, just as I've just been heckled by my screensaver, my streaming service, which had the episode all ready to go, and it's just as I was about to sort of press the button, get in the mode to press the button, it faded and jumped to an advert for something called Yellowstone with Kevin Costner, as if to say, even I, who are a screensaver, an automated computerized screensaver, are bored of you, Toby. So let's throw some Doctor Who in the mix in an attempt to make me more interesting. And it's going to be Season 10, Episode 1. First shown on the 30th of December 1972. So yeah, strictly speaking, he's in the 9th year, and definitely closer to the 23rd of November 1972 than the 23rd of November 1973, which was the 10th anniversary. Anyway, Season 10, with great company, Siobhan Gallichan, who I'm very interested to see broadcast her thoughts on this particular story. I mean, any story, but this one, as celebration is in the air. Where are we now? I'm recording this with exactly a week to go before the 59th anniversary. So this is about as whatever the Who equivalent of festive, as hoostive as I get. So we're going to press play In 3, 2, 1. So, I mean, I'm used to this one being very good quality because obviously the bootlegs of it were much better because somebody might have taped them off the 5 Faces of Doctor Who, and I remember that placeholder. But that was on my copy of the Crotons. They had a sort of mosaic of the 5 Faces. But actually, no, 3 Doctors are, because a lot of the Pertwees came from ABC anyway, so they were good quality. And also I had this, there was a B Sky B weekend that my mum's friend Sheila noticed. They had B Sky B and knew I was a Doctor Who fan, and so just sort of taped it over the weekend with whatever tape she had to hand. And sometimes this cut out in episode 2 and I missed a little bit of it, but basically taped the whole weekend for me, which was extremely thoughtful of her. This is Laurie Webb. I spoke to Laurie Webb, Mr. Ollis, and I remember watching this with my brothers and them going, oh yeah, he disappears, because they've of course read the book, so we had the books. This is Laurie Webb, who plays a very taciturn character here. He's quite sort of monosyllabic and quite... Laurie is a wonderful, ebullient Welshman who I last spoke to in May of this year on the occasion of his 98th birthday. And I am delighted. I still sing to myself, because if you're getting to my age and nobody to talk to, you can lose your voice. So I still sing to myself every day, and I play golf 3 times a week. Oh, it's so marvellous to hear from you, Toby. And I tell him that the Doctor Who fans and Katie Manning are always asking after him. Lovely fella. And I had the pleasure of actually watching the 3 Doctors with him the first time he'd ever seen it, which is delightful. And here is his fictional wife, Patricia Pryor, Pat Robinson, talking to Dr. Tyler, Rex Robinson. There's a love triangle, because Rex Robinson and Patricia Pryor, these two here, were married in real life. And as with Laurie, I hear from Pat every year at Christmas, because I had the pleasure of interviewing Rex and Pat at home. Pat and Laurie actually live within 5 minutes of each other, which is... I've never met the Swans, so the name dropping will stop. And Pat. Oh, so that's it for Laurie this episode. But I think he's a great character. I love Mr. Ollis. He's a delight. I think I already know my top thing for episode 4. But this is a great Doctor Who beginning. You know, somebody goes missing, all on film, which is very nice. But yeah, so Pat and Laurie live 5 minutes away from each other, but actually weren't aware of that until I visited Rex and Pat at home and interviewed them. Rex has sadly since passed away. There he is, great servant to Doctor Who. All his stories are Lenny Mayne stories. He was great friends of the director Lenny Mayne. So he pops up as Gebek in Monster of Peladon, Dr. Carter in the Hand of Fear, and then I interviewed Laurie sometime afterwards, and when we sort of pulled in, we realised... In fact, I'd actually got the addresses muddled up, because I'd got both sets of addresses, and we stopped outside Laurie's house. My friend Peter drove me, and then I went, oh no, that's the wrong postcode. So I actually stopped outside Laurie's house before I'd even met him, and then drove off. And it was like, oh, weird. And so that made me determined to actually, get in touch with Laurie and ask, because I'd got his address, but I'd not written to him at that point. And yeah, they weren't far away from each other at all. And since Laurie and Pat have met up and are on the Looking for Lenny documentary that I did on the season 10 Blu-ray on the disc for this. This is a story, but this is a story that I loved when it was repeated for the 5 Faces of Doctor Who, and I love this setup of the image of Mr. Ollis being zapped through the black hole and all this. I loved all this sort of scientific-y stuff, and John Pert was well at home with this, isn't he? And his lab is basically just a room with a sort of Bunsen burner and a tap. And Dr. Tyler is a great character. I like the way he shows love the way he shows the Brigadier, and the Brigadier goes, yeah, show it to the Doctor very politely. Although I do understand those that complain about the Brigadier's sort of regression from being, tough, pragmatic soldier into being slightly blimpish comedy stooge. I like the fact that we have both Brigadiers, and that that we can enjoy both aspects of Nicholas Courtney's wonderful characterization, which, as time goes on, probably gets a bit closer to Nicholas Courtney. But I love the Brigadier. The Brigadier is one of my favourite Doctor Who characters. He always seemed slightly more proper than a companion to me, because he was a sort of figure of authority, and it was like he was stopping Doctor Who being childish because he was a senior military figure. But I think Pertwee looks fantastic in this, and this is my image of sort of Doctor Who seeming quite grown up, especially with the Five Faces of Doctor Who, when we'd had, you know, the Crotons, which had been a bit sort of cardboardy, and Carnival of Monsters, which had been a bit sort of zing pop comic strip, and I remember being shocked by Carnival of Monsters and thinking it wasn't Doctor Who when I channel hopped, because the functionaries looked, you know, not great. But this, I remember seeming like, you know, the proper Doctor Who in the Target books that I was too young to be able to read, but, you know, I scanned the covers and the back covers, and, you know, the cover of this had that brilliant striking image of Omega with the fire coming out of his fingers. I've just reminded myself. Oh, Liberty Hall, Dr. Tyler, Liberty Hall. That's a much quoted piece that people don't like, do they? Well, our hallway in this house has a little plaque on it that says Liberty Hall, and just in the same way that our kitchen has a little plaque that says Security Kitchen, and our landing has a plaque that says Dinsdale Landing. That's the kind of house I'm broadcasting from. I love that image. That's just such a simple image. Why would his face be burnt into the sort of lightning that takes him into the black hole or whatever? It doesn't matter. I think it's a really striking image, and it sets up the mystery. And then it happens to this guy as well, and you think, well, he's too memorable a character to not come back, so that's going to lead us to the next bit of the story. And and this seemed so good, the blobby thing. Pat's such an experienced actress. She did so many sort of adverts. She's a lovely lady, Pat. The blobby thing seemed so realistic, and then when I was quite late getting this in my collection because I'd already seen it, so I saw a lot of the other Pertwees first, and I love John Pertwee's leather gloves. I remember at school in the playground, sort of playing Doctor Who. It seemed that John Pertwee was such a sort of figure of authority and such a sort of correct, grown-up Doctor, because he had sort of black leather gloves, and he didn't look eccentric or dandified at all to me. As Larry Turner says, not many people can carry off a frilly shirt. It's Jimi Hendrix and John Pertwee. But Pertwee's clothes, and you can see people that aren't John Pertwee trying to get away with John Pertwee. I mean, I know people who wear sort of velvet jackets, and I've tried a couple of times, and they don't look good. They look good if you're John Pertwee. There's something about the elan that he has, that he's such a sort of bold personality. It doesn't sort of swamp him or make him look like he's trying too hard. He gets away with it. He carries it well. It looks natural on him. It doesn't look like he's trying too hard. And I think in other hands or on other shoulders, Pertwee's outfits definitely look like they're trying too hard. But the mixture of his frame, that brilliant face, that shock of hair, it's perfect. Nice little bit of POV here from Lenny Mayne. But I remember when I came to revisit this, being quite embarrassed by the Drain Boogie creature. But I remember it seeming really important that the thing kidnapped Bessie. It was like it's one thing to take those two guest characters, one of whom hasn't said anything, but it's taken Bessie again. That's a sign that they're not going to have killed off Bessie. It's got to go somewhere. Poor old Bessie. I love the fact that we have a car that we are sort of slightly affectionate about. And I remember a clip of this when I was at university being on the news. Was it on the news? It was a story about science fiction or something, or it was on a documentary, and it had the line about put a guard on the drains, and saying only in TV science fiction could you put a guard on the drains. But I remember back in the day that any time there was a clip on anything, I'd tape it, because you didn't necessarily have the best quality copies of the episodes or whatever. And you thought you were building an archive, because what if this program goes missing? Put a guard on the drains. I love that.
so Doctor Who. And Nicholas Courtney is dead serious there as well. He does the sort of slightly buffoonish elements of the Brigadier in this, but when he's not fazed by the Doctor saying put a guard on the drains, and that's what's brilliant about the character is that when he at his best he grounds the ridiculousness, because Doctor Who is a ridiculous show. It's stupid, and the key to its success often is that it takes its stupidity in its stride. It either embraces it or it sort of ignores the stupidity. You can go either way with that, and both are legitimate approaches, and different stories approach it very differently. And that's one of the reasons I love it, is that it has the sort of balls to say, this is what we do. We've got antimatter in the drain. We've got a monster. Put a guard on the drains. This is we'll throw some chewing gum packet at it a bit later on, and then do a joke about television. I love all of that. But when I was, and I remember, the unit soldiers shooting at the jail guards, and I remember being on the swings at school the next day and sort of saying to my mate, let's do that. And and it felt like that was real proper Doctor Who. As somebody sort of brought up, or had very recently seen season 18, which was sort of all about Burgundy mathematics, soldiers shooting at one-eyed jelly monsters was absolutely the sort of thing I want. This was definitely classic Who to me, and the army again seemed to legitimise everything and make it seem a bit grown up. I wanted my Doctor to be a bit grown up. That's the thing about being a kid. You want to be grown up, and when you're a grown up, you sort of go, oh, if I knew now, I wish I'd savoured being a kid a little bit more. But then, as I say, I had a sort of Damascene conversion where I got a bit edgy about the antimatter creature, and we'll see a monitor in Omega's world later that's not set properly, and you can see the edge of it, and some sort of sloppiness in the production. And I think Omega's world we will talk about. That it just seemed like this really hasn't got much of a sense of occasion considering what this story is about, and the Three Doctors went way down in my list of stories that I liked. I mean, and partially, but I mean this bit, which I remember as a kid being stunning, because it's quite windy. It means that every time the creature appears, there's an awkward edit, and he goes, "Holy Moses, what's that?" And you see that's because when they appear in the forest, everything's moving. You're never going to get a good cut there because the foliage is moving. But also, "Holy Moses, what's that?" And the response is, I mean, that's but you can't ignore behind Dennis Palmer there as Corporal Palmer when he saw the monster was Pat Gorman. Pat Gorman was, now that claw is in the quarry. They've got one shot of the claw with its light going up it, because if you look at the ground there, it's the quarry. It's not the car park or the verdant forest where these ones are. So I remember spotting that on about my 90th watch, and you're all going, "Oh, we knew that." But this, you see, this was absolutely classic Doctor Who to me. This was the Doctor Who that my brothers watched before I was born. There it is. Yeah, that's the quarry floor. Same shot. Soldiers getting blown up by... Oh, is that Leslie Bates? Great. And there's a bazooka. And the creature's going through the... So that's a lovely shot. I mean, you have to be careful with the gel guards. I have friends that always thought they were called gel guards, which has always baffled me because it's GEL and that's gel. But anyway, I've done a whole podcast on, and I'm culpable of my own inexplicable mispronunciations as well. So I'm throwing no pronunciation stones at anyone. You have to be careful with the gel guards because when they shuffle or go, they are amongst the silliest Doctor Who things of all time. But actually, I like it on the book cover because there's a shot of Benton and Troughton sort of being escorted by them, and it's in the quarry, so their sort of route has got a few stones painted, but it sort of looks like that could be bits of gel guard that are kind of fallen off. And the picture's not... It's an illustration where, I got that impression. I love Benton coming through the window. That's the sort of thing Benton does brilliantly. I love Sergeant Benton, and I think this is a particularly good story and a moment of history. Sergeant Benton entering the TARDIS and giving the best response. John Levine is doing brilliant work here as it's the slightly pained lack of comprehension and the fact that he sort of takes his hat off in sort of resignation to it. And I love his response. Aren't you going to say, it's pretty obvious, isn't it? And this is all because Fraser Hines was unavailable to do this with Troughton, so they needed a foil for Troughton, and I think Richard Franklin was doing something else. But either way, Yates and Troughton's Doctor is not as delicious a prospect as Benton and Troughton's Doctor. But we get that great series of Benton coming through the window, going in the TARDIS for the first time. Isn't it delightful to think that it's taken till season 10, so he's had 3 seasons, as a regular or semi-regular, and not been inside the TARDIS, and here he is, and it doesn't make much of a thing because it's part of the story, but it is its own kind of milestone. But yes, I had a bit of a downer on the 3 Doctors for quite a long time. I don't think Gallifrey helps. It's a funny old setup that we have here, even though all of these actors have an illustrious Doctor Who pedigree. It is quite a hammy planet. Now Graham Lehman at the desk, excellent actor, unusually bearded. He's already been a Time Lord in Colony in Space. He was Price in Fury from the Deep. He was the Grand Marshal in the Seeds of Death. And he's the controller in the Macra Terror. So he's doing pretty well on Who's Round. He's only... Who's Round? Freudian podcastian slip. He's only got Colony in Space still to go on Happy Times and Places. So I will not point out that he's sitting down and that he's an actor who, before... disabled actors were featured prominently on television. He was sort of snuck in there and quite often given parts involving not standing up, and here he is again. Now Roy Purcell has been in The Mind of Evil as Prison Officer Powers. He did quite a few voiceovers and things, and I discovered recently, because somebody gave me a load of theatre programmes that his dad had collected, and I was going through, and I found a program, and I put 2 and 2 together. Lenny Mayne was very loyal to his actors. Roy Purcell, this guy here, there's an actor called David Purcell, who is the guy that some people think looks a bit like Steve Coogan at the beginning of Hand of Fear, who blows up the quarry. And I found... I think in one of these programs there is a now, for years that was supposed to be a clip from the Macra Terror of Patrick Troughton there, and it turns out no, it's just a bit shot on the quarry. But we could have had a moment from the Macra Terror, and that actually made me once say to a fan, an older fan that I met, because there's that clip of the Macra Terror and the 3 Doctors. If we could get clips and sort of photographs and marry them with the soundtracks, you could sort of recreate the stories. And he spoke to me like I was a fool. Well, who's a fool now that you get them on? Actually, people pay for them on official releases. Here's Troughton. You could see his reflection in the TARDIS. It was little sort of production glitches like that made me think it's a slightly tatty story, seeing as it's an anniversary special, although it's not really. Anyway, let me go back to Roy Purcell before I forget. Roy Purcell's theatre biog in this one of these many programmes that I have that I've got to go through said, and his son David has recently entered the acting profession, blah, 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 following his footsteps. And it's like, oh, David Purcell, who's directed by Lenny Mayne in The Hand of Fear, is the son of Roy Purcell, who's directed by Lenny Mayne in The 3 Doctors. And that was not a piece of biographical information we actually had anywhere in Whodom, or certainly not in the Doctor Who guest actors circles I hang around in. So that was quite an exciting thing to discover. Those sorts of things can make my day. Troughton is so delightful. I love the way he talks to Joe. It's not quite the same performance. I think he's slightly more schoolboy-esque. I think he's slightly OTT in places, Troughton, and Troughton is probably my favourite Doctor. He's in the boxing room with Tom Baker, and occasionally one will land a blow on the other. I think Troughton is more consistent. Tom Baker does go wayward in his middle years and gets away with murder or doesn't. Whereas I think Troughton is pretty much on the button all of the time. He's a consummate character actor, and I love this characterization. I love his ability to balance comedy and the deadly serious. And I just love this sort of scampering schoolboy persona that he sort of uses to deflect danger or cause his enemies, in a Columbo-esque style, cause his enemies to underestimate him. And I actually love all of this bit, bits of the wall go missing. I love the fact that the unit door turns up, in the Wonderland and all of that. I also love a submachine gun. It just makes it feel kind of all that sort of stuff, because it's the iconography of the sort of war films that were prevalent very much at this time. Every other film was a war film, or every other classic war film that was on telly was a war film, and they were things that were from my granddad's time, or that the grown-ups watched, and there were quite a lot of books about the war. So anything that had sort of soldierly stuff felt as though, again, it popped the fantastical elements a little bit and made them seem a little bit more grown up and acceptable to grown-ups, the children's own program that adults adore. And of course, this is the first time we see Troughton's Doctor in colour. And he wrangles the recorder a lot more in this than he does for quite a lot of his era. So I don't know if I ever got to the point of saying, having said yes, I was saying it's a very odd set, this Time Lord set, but that's quite a famous shot of the two of them sort of arguing with each other, and there's William Hartnell in his garden, and I think this is. This is one of the extraordinary things, because Hartnell had to leave because he was ill, and he hadn't acted that much at all after Doctor Who, and certainly wasn't acting at this point. And of course, we all know the story of him being approached, and they got him on the phone on a good day. And but the fact that we have him on this monitor with, I love Troughton's smile, which is sort of slightly, it's like he's sort of humouring him, but rather delighted by him. And I love the way that Troughton's smile vanishes immediately. He's so good at that sort of gag. And there are actually, there's no planning to this, but Troughton and Pertwee are an excellent contrast. And I do like the fact that they bickered, and I like the fact that the actors weren't quite simpatico, and Troughton, because proper pros, showed a bit of deference, even though he's a much more experienced actor than Pertwee, and so that they became great mates, because I think Pertwee, needed a bit of managing. But the fact that they became, but Pertwee got over his, because it will be from insecurity. He was probably, the fact that Troughton would ad-lib and dance around the script a little bit made Pertwee, who was not an experienced drama actor, sort of like, no, I do it from the script, and Troughton. I remember this. I remember this episode ending, watching it as part of the Five Faces of Doctor Who. So exciting, and it's a great episode ending. And but yeah, so Troughton and Pertwee becoming this brilliant double act at conventions and stuff, and they are great. Great foils for each other, but the fact that we have Hartnell on that terrible monitor, which is just a crap telly, which has stuff reflected in it, and we never cut to that film that we have Hartnell in his last television performance, just on that screen, and we never get a proper close up. And things like that, and Troughton reflected in the in the TARDIS when he arrives, and the Time Lord set, and the fact that the Time Lord's a bit, there's I think some performance issues on Gallifrey, and they haven't got the round paper out yet, which were all things that. So I went through a period of really disliking this story because it had sort of production elements that I don't think matched the ambition of, well, one, the script. We're about to go to a dream world that looks like it was made, spangles melted over IKEA, or a quarry. But also, I thought there were certain sort of slightly lazy bits of production amongst it all. Which, seeing what the ambition of the script is, which is to take us back to the dawn of the Time Lords and to take us to a world conjured of the imagination, it set my teeth on edge for a long while, this story. And then when I did it for running through corridors, I was still not. I think I wanted to sort of dig at it a little bit and say, this story that everyone just loves it because it's an anniversary story, and actually the story itself is not that good, because I don't know what that drive is to do that, sort of say, how you all think this, well, I'm actually right that it's not as much, it's not as good as you think. And I that seems a really odd drive. That seems a really strange ambition to have. And I've come out of the other side of that now. And actually, I mean, partially, I think, because I ended up, visiting almost the entire cast at home, Rex and Pat, Laurie, and keeping in touch with them for some reason. Stephen Thorne as well, who plays Omega. I know John Levine and Katie, and so it's quite special to me that this thing I played in the playground that seemed like this, this real sort of classic example of what grown-up Doctor Who that my brothers watched should be, and I now have a bit of a personal connection with it. But I've actually learned to love the Pertwee era a lot more for what it is rather than what it isn't. I've said this before, it isn't what I'd imagined from the Target books, but that doesn't mean it's not great. And the last few times I've watched The Three Doctors, I have fallen under its spell again, and this one is no exception. There's so much to love in this. I mean, the idea of bringing the Three Doctors together, fabulous. And this is the first time they'd done it. And it seems amazing that Hartnell, who, so poorly and out of the profession, and not long before his death, suddenly is doing the unthinkable. William Hartnell returned to Doctor Who. So even if he's a shadow of his former self, and I love those pictures of them together. If only somebody had talked to them there. I wonder what he was like that day at that photo shoot with the three of them. And he looks very different, doesn't he? His face has sort of got slightly puffier. His profile is not the same. His silhouette, the silhouette of his face is not the same. The time winds will ravage us all. So I think that's all rather charming, that it's the first time Doctor Who really sort of looks back and goes, this is part of some greater story. Now, Doctor Who can do that too much, but I actually find it rather touching that it does it at this point in its history, because it doesn't do it that much in those early days, and it is a thing of diminishing returns. And yet this is, but this is the original, and this is the. That said, I'm recording this not long after The Power of the Doctor, and I still got that thrill, even though it wasn't. It was the first Doctor we've got used to, really, after Hartnell and Hurntle, David Bradley, and it was still like a connection with the past, and the fact that he's such an amazing actor, playing a sort of stand-in version of the First Doctor, that he's now an official version of the First Doctor, is really sort of weird and extraordinary. And how great it was seeing Paul McGann and all of the classic Doctors too. I still get that thrill, but it's always coupled with that idea of going, but what does this mean to the viewing public? And that is also actually a little bit more self-loathing than necessary, because who cares? But the public will take it. The public will take what they're shown, if it's too alienating, they won't watch. But I didn't get that impression about the power of the Doctor. Well, partially because all of that was kept as a surprise, and it's made clear that it's, you know, they are whatever they are, and they're, you know, and they're throwing out plot information. So, you know, forget about what other people think. Enjoy it for what it is. Don't go, but I need a spoonful of self-loathing to help that sugar go down, because otherwise it just tastes too good. But I love Pertwee's leather gloves. I love the velvet jacket and leather glove combo. It just seems to me, you know, that seemed to be such a grown-up Doctor. And then the contrast with Troughton's sort of childishness. So what is my favourite thing about episode 1? Well, it has to be the wheeze. It has to be the starting point of the story, which is Doctor Who is 10 years old. Let's get the other two guys back. And these, you know, these three Doctors, I mean, are all superb, and they're all heroes of the show. And it's, you know, the show is still relatively young, and it's survived every change of leading man, and every leading man has brought something different and built something new into the mythology. And it's amazing what how many changes the show goes through in these first 10 years, and yet still manages to be the same show. And you know, the idea that, you know, stuck on 20th century Earth helping the military is miles away from you know, the weird Hartnell space adventures or thoughtful historicals, you know, and yet it's all lovelily linked together. So it has to be. I mean, there's other great things as well, isn't there? There's I mean, I just love Mr. Ollis. I love Mr. Ollis. I love his face in the in the black hole thing. I do love certain shots of the, you know, the gel guards going through the smoke. I love Sergeant Benton coming through the window. I love him taking his hat off in the TARDIS and saying, it's pretty obvious, isn't it? I love that. But for me, the best thing about episode 1 has to be the fact that for the first time ever, we see multi-Doctors sharing the screen. Those illustrious actors were prepared to come back and play second fiddle to the new leading man. And yet there doesn't seem like a hierarchy or a pecking order. It's just all part of one great thing. And that seems really important, even if the production doesn't quite give itself the grandeur that perhaps such an occasion demands. But maybe that's Doctor Who. Maybe that's the thing that's, you know, where 3 aliens invade the south of England. It's kind of like, we don't make a big show of it. There's not an oncoming storm. There's a bit of drizzle that we're gonna have to do our best to avoid. But it's, yeah, the 3 Doctors, episode 1. Best thing about it, it was the 3 Doctors. I would be a fool to pick anything else. I suspect Siobhan has been slightly more imaginative than that.
Part 1. There's a lot to this, isn't there? That was one of the things I thought about when I tried to decide which story to do. I actually got... This is my second go at this. I originally did this back in lockdown before the show had actually appeared, and I got the format wrong. So this is... I'm doing this on the day Liz Truss resigned. So there we go. Okay. So I'm redoing this. One of the things I was going to say was the lining of the cloak, of Pertwee's cloak. It's a beautiful royal blue colour, and it's the only time we see it, which is a shame. But I can't choose that. No, I can't. Then there's that scene. We all know the one. All 3 of them in the TARDIS, ending with me. I was very lucky to redo that, as if Bill was in studio that day with John Culshaw and Christopher Thompson, and that was a tick off the bucket list, I can tell you. My actual choice, though, and it's an odd one, but I'm putting it out here. It's the set for the TARDIS control room. I adore this TARDIS set. I adore it. We hardly see it. I mean, we see it here. We see it in Planet of the Daleks and Frontier in Space, but by then MFI have moved in, and we see it a little bit in Death to the Daleks. I love this control room. I think again it's because I was a child when I first saw it. To me, that's home. So there we go. Sorry, Toby, but it's the TARDIS control room set.
Oh, don't apologise. And to me, that's home. I find so moving. I find that such a wonderful summation of why we like the things that we like. I don't think I'd have even thought of choosing the TARDIS control room, but it makes absolute sense that if you were watching at a certain time, or if you came to a story with a certain set of emotions as you were coming to it, these things speak to us all in different ways largely because Doctor Who gets you when you're a kid, and that makes the dynamic that we have with particular stories so influenced by our particular situations, and some things that seem daft to others or even irrelevant, not noticed. I mean, it was there, I clocked it, I like it, but of course I can tell. But just in the same way that Pertwee's glove and jacket combo somehow speaks somehow to me, I just like the visual of it, and it seemed, and I remember thinking about it when I was a kid in the playground, and it somehow making it seem sort of proper and real, in a way that I can't really put into words. But so that's choice number one of Siobhan, the lining of the cloak is no dafter than that, and yet makes absolute sense to me as well. I wouldn't have minded, Siobhan, if you'd chosen the lining of the cloak, because I nearly chose the fact that he's got leather gloves and a velvet jacket with a frilly cuff between, dividing the two. And I think the TARDIS control room is a lovely choice. And to me, it feels like home, I think, is a lovely sentiment. And I feel a lot of that with this story. I think partially because, well, it occupies a very a very sort of stimulating place in my Doctor Who history, in that it was an old story, but an old story that I saw as a child, whereas most of the old stories I saw when I was a bit old. I saw this at 7? Seven. I was 7 when I saw this. So it was an early look at old Doctor Who, when, repeats were something to be treated with awe. I mean, I remember the picture of William Hartnell in the paper heralding the 5 faces of Doctor Who, and that just seemed like such an amazing thing to be doing. And it was, and it was BBC too, giving a big chunk of its repeat allocation to Doctor Who, and it was treated so respectfully. There was a real feeling of this is a treat into history, and history is something that a history of something that we all remember very fondly. It was none of this, this is old stuff that's a bit rubbish, which became the norm later on. Now, there may have well have been some of that in the papers that I didn't see, but certainly what one felt was that this is the golden age, and we bow before it, and aren't we lucky that this rare thing of a repeat, because not much was repeated in those days. I wish they'd repeat that was often a refrain about things people fondly remembered, but the chances that they would were very, very slim. You often had to wait for an actor to die to get a repeat of an episode of something, and when Troughton died, that didn't even happen with Doctor Who, and I remember being furious. And so, it exists in a fairly bespoke sort of section of my Doctor Who consumption. It's an old story that was new when I was young, and then when I got a bit older, it was one I'd already seen, and I went back to it, and it took me a couple of goes to sort of think what I thought was wrong with it, and I ended up not liking it an awful lot and rejecting that childhood joy, because it was certainly I think my most enjoyable story for me of the whole of the 5 faces of Doctor Who, perhaps by the first episode, which was just amazing to see. But I certainly remember there were no caveats with my enjoyment of the 3 Doctors. And so then I had to reject that naive childhood view, whereas the sophisticated teenager of me saw through its many flaws that needed to be pointed out to everybody and to spoil the enjoyment of those who were foolish enough to think it was any good. And then I gradually, as I got older, I didn't watch it much. It wasn't one I went to particularly. When I did, I sort of, shivered at the bits that didn't, the footsteps going the other side of the Eye of Singularity in episode 4, all those funny sort of production, shortcomings, frayed around the edges, which just seemed wrong and embarrassing, and certainly a thing I wouldn't want to show to other people, because again, you've always got in your mind what other people might think. To get to that point of, equilibrium with it and go, no, what is it? What does it want to be? And what were the bits that I love? What were the bits that I loved as a kid? What are the and they now to me outweigh the bits that as an adult I might be slightly squeamish about. And in fact, the radiation monster, which I used to think was awful, I think is fine. It's absolutely fine. It works well, and it earns us the line "put a guard on the drains," which is delightful. That's a very Doctor Who-y thing, a guard on the drains. So yeah, I've learnt to stop worrying and love the Three Doctors, and I hope to continue to do so in the next 3 episodes of that, with a fantastic guest who will be choosing, I'm sure, a number of very interesting things, and let's hope that I can choose at least one of. I mean, the other thing is I kind of have in my mind's eye what I might choose, certainly for episodes 2 and 4. So, because I've thought about this one, maybe because I was worried that it's a story that I have been down on in the past. But that's not going to be an issue. I thought that was great. I thought the whole setup was great. I thought Unit being, attacked by jelly monsters was great. The Trout and Pertwee dynamic is great. Seeing Hartnell is great, even though it's, slightly undermined by the execution and the limitations that they were put under, because they realised that one of their key actors was actually not going to be, up to much, which is very sad, actually. There's a real sadness at the heart of, that particular element of the story that is found wanting, is that, one of our heroes was not long for this world and actually, very poorly in it. He was the Doctor who was no longer with us when I was a young fan. Was only, he was the old man that had died. But of course, now all 3 of them have gone, but they live forever and together, thanks to the 3 Doctors, which is, of course, who they were. Forever will be. Well, oh my giddy aunt, you're watching Doctor Who with a dandy and a clown. And that's just me. I mean, I have been one or the other, and occasionally both at the same time. And now I'm confined to watching Doctor Who, but not being allowed to take part. I'm all 3 Doctors from the 3 Doctors, in one form or another. I am joined, as you heard, by Siobhan Gallichan, long-term fan, legend of fandom, William Hartnell, voice impersonator, podcaster extraordinaire, and all-round splendid person. So I'm grateful to Siobhan, who's also, this is the 2nd attempt she has made to do this. I'm tempted to listen to the first, because she's gone, I got it wrong, because she actually very kindly recorded before this podcast was on its legs, and has obviously been listening. Siobhan is a patron. Thank you, Siobhan. And just sent me thinking, could I do it again? I was like, I'm actually due to do the 3 Doctors very soon, but yeah, sure. So her contribution is hot off the press, but in a folder with the old contributions. So I wonder if she chose the same things. No, maybe not. Maybe that was, I don't know if it was just the way that she approached it in the phraseology, or whether, I don't know. I'm curious. Anyway, let us go to a place where anything is possible, including being in a quarry, as we go to this story that I loved when I saw it as a 6, 7, 8-year-old, and then really went off in my grotty teenage and adult life, and then in recent years learned to stop worrying and love, and then got some personal connections with as well. So it just goes to show why we revisit these stories, and there are new ways to enjoy. And who knows, in 20 years' time I might go off it again. But I can assure you, I suspect I'll still be watching it. I have it on DVD. I have it on Blu-ray. I also have it on a much more convenient for these purposes BritBox. Other streaming services are available, but none of them have Doctor Who on. And I'm going to watch from the beginning. And I'm going to press my button in 3, 2, 1. Yes, I'm used to always having this one in pretty reasonable quality, but yes, my mum's work colleague, Sheila, bless her, she'd got used up all her blank tapes to just keep pressing record on the B-Sky B Doctor Who weekend. And then I copied all these over to other tapes to sort of cut out the adverts and stuff like that. And I put all the interview material and stuff that was between episodes on the end of discs or elsewhere. Not discs, tapes. There were no discs in those days. And I remember going into school and talking to my friend Ollie about that episode ending. You know, it was something that really struck. And here we have something that is going to be hard pressed. So, spoiler alert, early on, here we find Patrick Troughton as the second Doctor and John Levene as Sergeant Benton, who I think are the most inspired pairing of all. I think John Levene is a better actor when he's directed by Douglas Camfield. Camfield brings something slightly more real out of John, and I think John is perhaps a bit more confident because Douglas Camfield made him feel confident. And anyone who's seen John at a convention will know John is not unconfident, but he has the confidence of, I think, a man with no confidence. Whereas I think the confidence Douglas Camfield gave him is one that enabled him to relax a bit and not overcompensate. However, I think here, I don't know if it's Lenny Mayne, the director. I'm not sure it is. I think it's more Patrick Troughton, who is very much an actor's actor. And if an actor of Troughton's calibre is treating you with respect, that makes you raise your game. And I think it also channels one of John Levene's greatest assets as Benton, which is this sort of slightly pained Labrador vibe that he's got going on. And the fact that sort of Troughton is slightly patronising as the Doctor, he and that's sort of part of the fun, is he's slightly patronising to people that are bigger and tougher than him. Now, here we have sort of, perhaps the biggest foray that the Brigadier has made into comic stooge, which sort of Troughton's antics sort of encourage a bit. But Nick Courtney's going that way as well, because he was sort of closer to this than he was to the sort of the slightly harder, tougher Brig of the earlier seasons. And I guess if you play a character for a long time, I suspect you get closer to yourself. And Nick Courtney was an actor, but he wasn't a character actor. He wasn't a sort of chameleon like actor in the same way that many of our character actors are. He was a character actor of types, and that's not to disparage him. Such people do amazing work and are very reliable in the things that they do, and still probably got to show more versatility in his career than an actor today often gets to. Certainly a jobbing actor, and I love Nicholas Courtney, but I am acknowledging that I can see why people don't like this aspect of the Brigadier, who's, hitherto been a very large, quite a serious character, a solid presence beside the dandified Doctor and the ridiculous antics. But this guy has seen it all. But I think the Chroma joke is great, but it makes no sense seeing me and me and me. I remember that delighting me as a child, and all of that I am he and he is me. But I remember at school again saying to my friend Ollie, love that me and me and me. I thought that was hilarious. Clyde Pollitt is wearing a wig as the Chancellor, and you can see because the last time he was on Gallifrey, which is his third Time Lord, who curiously appears first in the War Games, he's got less hair than that. He's also got a very sort of reedy, slightly sort of falsetto voice. He's got that quite fluting voice. Slightly raspy, fruiting voice. I quite like these performances, but they are quite hammy. Roy Purcell as the President is doing what is required. He's delivering the dramatic dialogue whilst holding blue and red bits of round paper. They're round, presumably, because you could put them up in your TARDIS with instructions. I don't know. But Roy Purcell, who I think is that's also a wig, isn't it? Those we are pledged to protect. They have very, very hammy dialogue as well. This is written very much as space people chatting space stuff to each other. You can't imagine any of these lot nipping out for a fag, or having lunch. But and you get actors like Roy Purcell as the President who are doing what you would do in a sort of Shakespeare play, playing, Maecenas or the Duke of Exeter or somebody, sort of standing there and giving it all your classical heft. And then when it gets dramatic or you get to the end of the scene, giving it a bit of serious welly. I love. And Clyde Pollitt, as the Chancellor, who's only in these first two episodes, so I have to talk about him, is the brother of Driver Evans Derek Pollitt, who also pops up in Doctor Who and the Silurians, doesn't he? In a tiny part. And there was a third Pollitt, Keith, who I think wasn't an actor, but he certainly wrote an obit of a little obit of Derek in the Guardian. And Clyde Pollitt did loads of work with the English Shakespeare Company with Michael Bogdanov when they were putting on sort of Henry V with people wearing Union Jack underpants, and it was all modern dress, and it was all actually against the kind of classical posturing of the kind of performances we see on Gallifrey. So he was actually part of quite a modern wave of Shakespeare performance, but died quite some time ago before the likes of me were writing to people. But he did have a late flourish to his career in an important corner of British theatre. People like John Woodvine and Gareth Thomas and people like that were doing that sort of work as well. Working with Bogdanov at the English Shakespeare Company. I quite like the Gel Guards when they do that. When they sort of walk slowly. I mean, the movement's not great. This is why we have movement choreographers these days, rather than Ricky Newby, who's a children's entertainer. Ricky Newby, who still occasionally sends me emails. He's still going strong. He was a Dalek and a Gel Guard. Ricky Newby sort of shuffling along. But I actually like the design. The one-eyed thing is good. The jelly, it's like a psychotic lump of jelly, and with a claw that shoots explosions. What's not to love? And I think they look quite good in the quarry as well. It's just when you have that sort of materialization in the first episode and the which I think is one of the funniest bits in all, unintentionally funny bits of Doctor Who. Holy Moses, what's that? Why didn't I choose that as my favourite thing? Because it embarrasses me to the core, but I'm finding it quite cheery today. I love... fill it with useless information. Television set. I wonder if that was a Troughton ad-lib. I don't know. Because there is the story, isn't there, of Troughton throwing in lines slightly differently or from left field, and Pertwee not coping, because lest we forget, it's not said often enough, actually, Pertwee had done very little dramatic acting in a television studio, if any at all, very, very little, before he played Doctor Who. And was always a bit self-conscious as an actor. He was a man of voices. He was an actor as a performer, but not a dramatic actor, and sort of hid behind the technique, of knowing your lines. Whereas Troughton was a bit more, organic and free flowing. But Troughton, when he realised that Pertwee wasn't happy with him coming out from a different side or saying a slightly different line, was smart and professional enough to go, okay, we'll do it your way, and the two got on famously, because Pertwee, I think, could be quite testy and had to be managed, and Troughton was smart enough to know how to manage him. I love all of that. I've talked over that. I love the image of a pair of doors in a quarry. I love even more the idea that it's a pair of doors in this, created imaginary wilderness, as something as prosaic as a pair of doors in this place that's created and held together by the will of Omega, as it turns out, which, if you had a multi-million-pound budget, I don't think you'd make it a quarry. Lenny Mayne is aided by the sun, which I think is making the location footage look rather lovely, and by the fact that he's decided to film it all at an angle to give it a kind of slightly skew-if aspect, which suggests, we're playing with reality and nothing's actually quite straight here. That's, when you're shooting in a quarry, trying to suggest something Doctor Who-y, and I love that, the incongruity of the game warden guy with his double-barrel shotgun and slightly quizzical expression popping up from behind a mound, as he does for the rest of the episode. And we love Laurie Webb. We love him. These two obviously get on, which I think is beautiful. I mean, I again, anybody that sort of takes Benton under their wing is nice. And yet, he's handy with a machine gun. He's convincing as a soldier. You know that if it gets down and dirty, Benton will lay down his life. It's a bit like in the episodes of Dad's Army when, they occasionally remind you that these guys, for all their hilarious antics, would lay down their lives and be very brave and blunt and about the sacrifice that they're about to make in a way that would make a lot of people of my generation, and certainly the ones before underneath, quake in their boots, and that kind of simple, uncomplicated, well, yeah, I would do that kind of bravery, that nonetheless is not sentimentalized, because it's not a sentimental thing, and is actually played with winning comedy here by look at Benton's sort of wounded sort of fear. I love this, and I think it's the perfect. John is not the world's greatest actor, but he does what he does. He does very well, and the things he does particularly well are this sort of thing. And I think this is the perfect story for Benton. And I'm not saying, here anything I wouldn't say to John. I saw John quite recently. I speak to him on the phone relatively regularly. He's a complicated fellow. And his heart is in the right place, and his mouth sometimes doesn't know how to articulate that. I love the fact that sort of Benton's, it's got slightly out of control. He did what he was told, and Courtney knows to be looking outside, so that then when he comes here, and then, so of course that's the shot of him in Mordred Undead, isn't it? That's the bit that they use for the flashback. So of course this is a landmark moment. It's the Brigadier in the TARDIS for the first time, And I can see what Siobhan means about the TARDIS interior. And actually, the guys in military fatigues within the TARDIS interior is rather nice. It's a nice. I talk a lot about juxtaposition in Doctor Who, the juxtaposition of the ordinary with the extraordinary, or the mundane with the spectacular. Rex is very good, I think, as Dr. Tyler, especially when you consider it's the same guy who plays Gebek in Monster of Peladon, and also Dr. Carter in Hand of Fear. But they're the real contrasts. Because you'd have probably gone for I mean, they never really went for huge names in the Pertwee era. It was very much, your lead guest stars were sort of doughty character actors rather than, serious leads, often most of the time. Which is why they can afford Land Rovers and things, I guess. But I was looking up a Z-Cars episode? I think I was looking for early appearances of Wendy Padbury earlier today for something somebody had asked me, and I looked up this episode of Z-Cars, and it had got Rex Robinson in. It had got David Purcell, who's in The Hand of Fear, who, as I pointed out last episode, is Roy Purcell's son. And so I think somebody, and I went, I bet this is directed by Lenny Mayne. And lo and behold, it was directed by Lenny Mayne. Now, you see, that looks to me, that angle makes it look like it's got the edge of the television screen. Now, maybe it's not. Maybe that's supposed to be, it's the sort of indentation and it's a sort of recess and the screen is set back. But it looks to me from that angle like it's a television set that they've not built the set round properly. And it's just that, I love that though. I love that. That's just a very sort of economical bit of, right, they can't run away. Lovely bit of Laurie Red behind a mound. And it makes and the gel guards are actually shot very nicely on location with their claws just coming to view, or bits of them. I think the filming work in the quarry is very nicely done, and I love those 70s explosions. Well, those Pertwee era explosions that are very, sort of orange and smoky and big, and they look really good. Because when you get to the 80s, the explosions all get a bit glittery and a bit fireworky, whereas they're real proper smoky explosions in the Pertwee era. Much more of a fan of 70s explosions than 80s explosions, so hang me. Now the video that Sheila did for me ran out at kind of this point, I think, in the episode, and it starts again when Troughton bangs the Brigadier's radio. I remember that. That's just me taking myself down memory lane for the bits I had missing of episode 2 of the Three Doctors. Now, yeah, I mean, I think this is the big failing of the story, and it's the design. Roger Lymington, who I think was long gone before anybody got a chance to speak to him. I mean, his design, I think, works brilliantly in Carnival of Monsters. This kind of kitschy 70s vibe that, sort of works for the inside of the Miniscope, which is run by kitschy 70s people. Vaughan Schirner, and it is slightly comic strippy with its three sets of, with its sets of characters. It's got Vaughan Schirner and the Miniscope, and they've got the three grey bureaucrats and the three people on the boat, and it's like, and they're all sort of types, and it's all quite zingy and fun and comic strippy. I love that. I think that is typical Troughton. Opening the radio and all the bits falling out. I adore that, and he does it with that kind of optimism that immediately turns to, oh no, I've buggered this up, that then turns to, oh, but I'm sure I'll make it work if I have a bash. And I love all of those things, and I love the combination of them. I love the story of that. That to me is sort of what Doctor Who does. So if Doctor Who is a genius, Doctor Who is also a genius who doesn't necessarily have the best methodology, but has a go anyway. Often makes mistakes, but somehow manages to bodge his or her way to success. And I love that. I can identify with that more than I can identify with, I'm the greatest electrician in the world, or I'm so righteous my righteousness will win through in the end. I much prefer a hero, which is why I like the Doctor, who is kind of flawed but in a charming way, because I hope that even when because we all muck things up, I hope that and we all do bad things as well. We're all prone to making mistakes, but I hope that if I ever do that, it's with the best intentions, and because I'm a bit crap at things, but I have a go and I do my best. Now I remember when we were doing Running Through Corridors, Rob getting very annoyed with this episode because Dr. Tyler is basically, having been quite fun with his E=mc², is now a bit of a pain in the arse, and basically runs off only to get captured again. And that's and that's kind of true. It does. They are sort of killing time before getting to the reveal of who the bad guys. And now Dr. Tyler's basically, isn't he? He's just going to go and run back to the Doctor. Now I can see what the design's aiming for there, actually, because you've got the doors that if the gel guards stand in, well, these partitions in the corridors that are made of sort of gel guard material. When that one was following Dr. Tyler, or when it stood in that sort of entranceway, it was like it sort of merged with the scenery. So I can see the ambition behind that, and it's kind of saying they're all made of the same stuff. So what, Omega has sort of created this world from his imagination, and so why wouldn't you make your guards out of the same as you know, just pluck a few bits out of, and it is quite godlike, isn't it? You know, I make eat out of the rib of Adam and all of that sort of thing. Yes, bang it and make it work. There we go. That's exactly the thing to do. I love that as well. That Doctor Who is the sort of person who bangs things to make them work. But yes, that I did, because you know, as we learn, Omega is a god in his domain. A hero, I should have been a god, is a wonderful line. You know, he's created this world, and so the idea that the walls are made of the same thing as the gel guards are made kind of works, but they look like obvious sort of bits of scenery flat cut out, and they're just they're a good idea, but they're rendered, I would say, as poorly as any set in the Pertwee era. That's a decent shot of Hartnell. It's crying out to get a shot of him that's not on the telly. Or I wish these film elements still existed, so that at least we had the full face of Hartnell. And I'd love it if we had a few of the outtakes and all of that. I'm afraid you'd never believe it. I was about to shout and guess I'm not even going to bother. I do like that dynamic, and that dynamic of Brigadier works again particularly well with Troughton, because Troughton has that, that slightly patronising air. Although I was listening to a lovely podcast called Hamster with a Blunt Penknife, presented by gorgeous Joey, who's a lovely podcast host, and I was listening to him, and Cy Hart, who I also haven't met, talking about, but their names to conjure, the Macroterra, and they were, discussing Troughton, and Cy used a word I've never used, and it's very difficult when you're doing these things to try and find new things to say about performers and characters, especially ones that are in a number of stories, like all of your Doctors. But he described Troughton as elusive. Cy Hart did, I think. And I thought that was a wonderful world, because we have Mercurial, we have Pixie. I've used Caper a lot, which I quite like. But yeah, it's that mysteriousness that he has, that although he's engaging, although he's funny, although he's got that sort of whirring intelligence, there is, when he's sort of inside his head and weighing up the consequences, there is an elusiveness to him, or elusive, as they would say in those. It quite works when things disappear in this story or appear. You get a nice close up for Corporal Palmer. That's all right. That's quite well done, though. which you get repeated on the original DVD. For some reason, that cliffhanger sort of exists in a glitch in it, and it happens twice. It's actually not as bad as you think. Nice close-up for Corporal Palmer at the end of the episode, and that's the last we see of him. Well, we see him next episode, but that's it for him. Dennis Palmer, he was a dancer, friend of Rex Robinson, long dead now, sadly. So we've had a little bit. And Clyde Pollitt we don't get any more of as well. I think Clyde Pollitt is better in the War Games than he is in that. As I say, I find Gallifrey a bit hammy. It's not even Gallifrey. The control room of Gallifrey a bit hammy in the Three Doctors. But I actually don't mind that because of it needs to represent the sort of the important alien space people doing the important alien space stuff that sort of tells us how and represent how important bringing these three Doctors together is, because they have quite a comic relationship and that banter is very nice. It would just seem like a laugh and a bit of a romp were there not, the lofty alien overlord guys, sort of hammily decrying how terribly important all of this stuff is. And, it is a convention. It is quite a dated setup and performance style and writing, all of that. But it kind of fits, and it's a sort of necessary change in tone with all the, the comic banter between Pertwee and Troughton, and indeed particularly the comic banter between Troughton and the unit guys, which all, if we're not careful, gets it. Although Troughton is very good with his, his steely eyes and that quick intelligence and that furrowed brow that even when he's being funny, he's suggesting that that's a front for the great danger that they're facing. Troughton never really sends it up. Although I have to say the Three Doctors is not my favourite performance of his. I think it takes him a while to get to settle into the role, although I have no idea what order it was shot in. But I think those early TARDIS scenes, I think he goes in a bit too high. I mean, he's such a good actor, it doesn't matter. But I'm comparing to when he's really on song. He and Tom Baker are my joint favourite Doctors, so this is me being very pernickety, but it's because I have to speak for every minute of entire episode runs. So I'm going to say everything, even though the episode's now stopped, so I could actually shut up. Why don't I? Well, because I have to now. You see, I mean, there's more of them next episode. What I really like, you see, is the bit where they sort of got their hands up, because that's on the back of the Target book, and that's in episode 3 of Benton and Troughton captured by the Gel Guards, and just that image of them with their hands up, I absolutely love. But it starts really in this episode. Once Pertwee and Joe get captured, it's Benton and the Second Doctor in the TARDIS, and I know the Brigadier comes in a little bit later, but because of what continues into next week, because the Brigadier goes off and does his chroma joke, for me the Troughton Benton pairing is one of my. I think it's probably my favourite thing about the whole story. It's one of my favourite things. It's two of my favourite Doctor Who characters. One who has, I think, no limitations. Troughton, I think, is such a good actor, so good at the serious stuff, so good at the balance. But that character that he comes up with to play the Doctor, I think, is such a genius creation, and he's such a good actor. And then you've got John Levine, who's not the world's greatest actor, but does what he does well, and actually excels when he's given certain responsibilities or is written in a certain way. He really rises to the occasion, and it's the fact that he's got those limitations that actually makes that rising to the situation more heroic, and actually then feeds into how you respond to Sergeant Benton, because he is, quite a straightforward guy who's not the smartest, who's doing his best, and also is a wonderful foil, both John Levine and Sergeant Benton. And I think I think he works particularly well with Troughton. So it's the Benton, Troughton. I've mixed my actors and my characters there. Combo is my choice of favourite thing for episode 2, and indeed, I mean, it's one of my favourite Doctor Who things. Siobhan, what are you gonna choose for episode 2? I should say what I reject. I nearly would have had just the explosion, the explodey bit, with the gel guards around the Dr. Joe and Dr. Tyler. Love that. Simple, effective, exciting, great when you're a kid. I love Troughton smashing the Brigadier's radio. That's adorable. I love Mr. Hollis popping his head up from behind mounds. I like the way Lenny Mayne has shot the Netherworld in angles. I love the double doors. Oh, do I save Troughton and Benton for next week? Actually, well, no, because something else might come up. Because I love that image of the doors and Bessie and the bits of the lab, in contrast to the desolate alien Netherworld. Having something as contemporary and mundane as a pair of doors stuck, in a faraway alien landscape, I think is so adorably Doctor Who. And even though it's compromised by the fact that it's a quarry, when I was a kid watching that, it's an alien planet. It's not supposed to be an alien planet. It's supposed to be this amazing world conjured by Omega, who's obviously got a slightly limited imagination. I think we shall make it stones, but a hero. I should have been a quarryman. I do like the door on the alien planes, but no, I love that image. I do. I adore it. I adore it, the conception of it. Let's put some doors in an alien. That's Doctor Who. Isn't that Doctor Who? Just a pair of doors in an alien landscape. Yeah. I have to explain Doctor Who to anybody now. It's just a pair of doors on an alien landscape. Benton and the Second Doctor.
Episode 2 or part 2 or however you want it. It's Patrick Troughton. Quite simply, I mean, yes, we are getting a slight caricature of the Second Doctor here, but this isn't Pat's show. He's just turned up as a guest, and he's giving his party turn, if you like. And it's just beautiful. We get all the best bits of the Second Doctor in one package. There's great stuff there. His interaction with Nick Courtney, especially in this episode, is just hilarious. Especially, and kudos to Nick Courtney for this, but the look he gives Troughton when the Brigadier first realises who he's talking to, and the oh no. Oh, but Troughton is just a joy, slamming a walkie-talkie microphone on the console. Now try it. And we got to say Troughton. We've got to. Yeah.
Now, I mean, do I get half a point for that? Half a point for that? Maybe. It's up to you. And that's an interesting observation about saying, yes, I'm glad I'm not the only one who thinks that occasionally Troughton is like a sort of caricature of his previous performance, but I get that observation that, he's an interloper into the series as it is now, rather than the lead in his own series, and also it's been a while since it's only a couple of years since he played the part, but that dynamic is necessarily different. So, okay, I'll buy that. So I think I get half a point for that. I get a point that is stuck in a time eddy and watching from afar as the other part recedes into the distance, something like that. Anyway, I enjoyed that, and again I remembered that episode ending from when I saw it the first time. I remember, the disappearance of Unit HQ, and I remember my brothers talking about that, saying, yeah, because that was important. Whereas I think, this is actually the first unit story I ever saw. And it just seemed so right, soldiers in the grounds of, their headquarters, submachine gunning, alien jelly beasts. That to me seemed like the Doctor Who of yore that I imagined Doctor Who to be like when I was a kid growing up on a diet of, season 17 and 18. And yes, when I watched this, season 18 had just happened. It was the gap between seasons 18 and 19. And as I say, I love season 18 now, but it seemed to me to be sort of quite elegiac, prosaic burgundy maths, velvet burgundy maths talking, and I was much more. I had a much bigger appetite for soldiers with submachine guns shooting at jelly beasts in a car park. So, and doors on alien landscapes, because we know those doors, as uninteresting as they are, well, it's the very fact that they're uninteresting that just throws up all the possibilities of what could be on the other side of them. And on the other side of this will be episode 3, which will be next time. But until then, that's it from me and me and me. Well, hello, everybody. I'm recording this in the week of Doctor Who's 59th birthday, so sort of a month or so before the anniversary, the birthday of this story, which was broadcast at the end of 1972 and the very beginning of 1973. So it is 49 years old. God, that's extraordinary, isn't it? And yet when I saw it, it was relatively old. I saw it as part of the 5 Faces of Doctor Who. So at that point, it was sort of, 8 years, 8 years old. But, I was 6 or 7. So yeah, this was 73. Early 73. Yeah, so actually, it was exactly a year before I was born, because I was born in January 74. So, my goodness me. So this is, this is a year older than I am, in terms of when it was screened. Obviously, it was made prior to that. But time is a strange thing. And of course, if you're not a patron and you're listening to this, it is irrelevant because I don't release these anywhere near to the dates that they are recorded. This is not a current affairs podcast. This is just me watching Doctor Who. However, I felt it worth noting that there was something in the air that I hadn't just done this anniversary story, although I'm sure Stephen Moffat in one of his editorials at DWM pointed out that it's not really an anniversary story because it's nowhere near November 1973, which would have made it an anniversary story. It's the beginning of the 10th season as opposed to the 10th birthday party, which is fair enough. But I think our hive mind has it down as it's the 10th anniversary story. It's the first time you get 3 doctors, all of the doctors together, and the 10th season is the 10th anniversary of the show, and it enters 1973, which is the show's 10th year. And as I've discussed earlier, this is a story that I've gone up and down with. So let us see. I hope you're enjoying it. I'm very much enjoying it this time around. And I did enjoy it last time I saw it as well. So I'm not, but this process of being positive does help me to, see the virtues in everything. It's a good, I suppose it's a tonic for life, isn't it, really? And I've always been sort of glass half empty, or be pessimistic because then you're not disappointed. But actually, and it sounds crass, I'm so sorry, and it's not very British to say it, but if you try and be positive and you try to look for the best in things, being positive is harder. I mean, I'm a freelance performer, writer, present. I'm freelancing in the arts. I have to solicit for work all of the time. I'm not going to tell you how many things I've been turned down for today, and the manner in which I was turned down for one of them. Positivity does not come easily to me. It is not generally what goes on inside my head, despite what comes out of my mouth in these podcasts. But what comes out of my mouth is an attempt to be a tonic to the stiff drink that is negotiating much of life. So, I'm no goody two-shoes. That's all I'm saying. This isn't cloying sentimentality. This is an attempt not to be that guy. Not to be the guy, when you see somebody on Facebook and somebody will go, I like that thing. And they go, I don't like that thing. Or, I met that person from that thing. Never heard of them. You go, do you know what? I'd just not say anything. So as this is a podcast where I'm not allowed to not say anything, this is why, mission restatement, I try to accentuate the positive, because it is a grim world out there. But why come to me for more of that? So with that in mind, let us watch from the beginning. I'm watching on BritBox. It is available on the Season 9 Doctor Who Blu-ray set, which I have, and on DVD. I think there's a special edition as well. I have both of those. I've got the Target novel. I don't have the VHS anymore. I did actually get rid of my VHSs, but I sent them to a good home. It was just at the time that charity shops were stopping accepting VHSs. Not that I really wanted to take them to a charity shop anyway, but I thought at least there somebody would be getting something out of it. But I put a thing on Facebook saying, does anybody have any kids who are into Doctor Who who might like to visit the old stuff? And this guy said, yeah. So he came along, and I had 2 big IKEA bags, maybe even 3, full of Doctor Who VHSs that went to a lad. I hope he liked them. But he's now probably chucked them out and is maybe right now going to fire up episode 3 of The 3 Doctors, which I'm going to watch from the beginning in 3, 2, 1. Well, I hope that I've edited that deftly enough to make it not apparent that decades have passed since I said 3, 2, 1 now, and that title sequence playing through the correct speaker at the correct speed. I mean, I've had to come in of out of apps that the internet's playing up because it's raining. I mean, I take the mickey out of Omega because he's created this world through sheer force of his will, and he's made place with a terrible chair, panto scenery, and a quarry background. But we are reliant on a technology that when it rains, none of the things, seeing as we made all of our technology reliant on, even my washing machine can be turned on via the internet. I actually do it manually because I don't know, I haven't done that bit. But everything is reliant on the internet, and yet if it rains, my internet doesn't work. I mean, I laughed at the Seeds of Death, didn't I? For going, oh yeah, fancy having an invasion tool that is scuppered by rain. Well, we've become reliant on a technology in this country. I live in Manchester, and it's like, yeah, no, it can do anything. Put all your eggs in the internet basket. It's a basket that, by the way, the handle breaks and it gets soaked if it's raining. Here we have Omega, played by the majestic Stephen Thorne. I love the design of Omega. I think the mask is marvellous. I think Stephen Thorne's voice is incredible. And I like the fact that Doctor Who is going, well, it's the 10th anniversary story, or is it? Let's look at the genesis of the Time Lords. I think, that's a big enough occasion to warrant the 3 Doctors coming through. So there's a sense of occasion about this. And, at least they make his entrance high up on some, raised stairs. That's quite theatrical. I mean, I think it is a bit of a shame that the sets are, I think, amongst the weakest in the show's history. I mean, look at this. This is this is grim stuff. Bad CSO, and sort of a mixture of cling film, bubble wrap, and gaudy paint. I've got a cardigan not unlike Dr. Tyler's. I've just noticed it's my new cardigan. Yes, I'm of an age now where I get a new cardigan, which actually fits me quite snugly. I'm rather fond of it, but I wasn't Dr. Tyler cosplaying, although I probably could, because I've got jackets and shirts not unlike those as well. He's got a stronger moustache than I, though. Although I think that might well be a fake moustache that Rex is sporting there. Stephen Thorne was a marvellous radio actor, but blessed with great height as well. So if you want somebody godlike for Doctor Who, he's an excellent choice. Look, I love that cloak. I think that mask is extraordinary. The big gloves are great. And the idea of the person that created time travel for the Time Lords, which begs the question, what were they called before that? I remember the Tony Hawk's gag. What was Captain Hook called before he lost his hand? Otherwise, that's nominative determinism with quite tragic consequences. And I had a big argument with I say a big argument. He was a bit cutting and patronising, my son, who I think at this point was like 12, and doesn't know how to make a cup of coffee, and hasn't done classical Greek at school, which I have. It's omega. It's omega. It's not. It's omega. But I think the way that things happen, like apple ties became appetizer. Wendy Richard, I think, actually put an S on the end of a name and then crossed it out on her autobiography, Wendy Richards, because she's Wendy Richard. I suspect, like Stephen Hawking's, Omega will become known as Amiga because more people mispronounce it than don't. Now I'm probably going to get letters going, actually, Toby, it should be Omega. But when I did Greek, it was definitely Alpha, Beta, Gamma, Delta, Epsilon, Zeta, Mu, Omega. It was not Amiga. Don't write in. I don't care. I'm sorry I was chatting through a great line. A hero, I should have been a god, which speaks to Omega's problem. He's a bit sort of Dr. Morbius, isn't he, or whatever? He's a bit Prospero. He's created all of this world, monsters and fairies alike, through his magic. In his case, through the amplification of his mind, and of course, I think that's gonna give you ego problems. I know people who've had extended run on television series who've suddenly got a bit cocky. So I think if I could make a planet and summon a chair at will, I could see why you might get a little bit above your station, especially if any station in the vicinity has been made by your own force of will. Pertwee has a natural authority, doesn't he? And he can sit in a chair. That's I quite like that shot that Lenny Mayne has gone round the back of the Omega's pink teleglobe and filmed him through it, which is very nice. Saves you having to project anything onto it, but makes for an interesting shot. Wonderful landing acting by Troughton, Courtney and Levine, who you all know will have been absolutely game for jumping in the air and landing at the same time. I love the way Troughton says, I think you should prepare yourself for a bit of a shock. That's slightly, like he's sort of talking to a child, slightly patronising. I don't know how the scanner can get a picture of the TARDIS. But it's fine. We can rationalise that if we like, any way that we like. Look at Benton looking a bit resigned to it all. Yeah, this is the sort of continuation of my favourite bit from from episode 2, which is the Benton Troughton double act. He's wonderful, Troughton, isn't he? So his eyes are always darting and going, and he's furtive and he's interested and he's calculating and he's working stuff out. And funny, over the weekend I watched some Doctor Who for pleasure. I don't always do it to bestow my opinions upon you out of the goodness of my heart. I'm so sorry. Why are you listening to this? But I watched The Web of Fear because I can and because it's wonderful. And it's amazing how well, I know. I mean, partially history is unkind to The Web of Fear in its depiction of the Brigadier, or history has been unkind to The Web of Fear because Colonel Lethbridge Stewart is there to partially be set up as is this guy the bad guy? I mean, it's not solely him because Harold Chorley, the snivelling journalist, is also a major suspect, as is cowardly driver Evans, and Staff Sergeant Arnold does give the odd clue every now and again. There's a bit where they say, was the doctor killed by the Yeti? And he goes, no. And they go, how do you know? And he goes, well, it's just a hunch. And that's in episode 2, I think. But Colonel Lethbridge Stewart, when the doctor says, I've got this spaceship that travels through time and space, he goes, fine. Trout slaps his head. And a lot of actors wouldn't get away with that. Look at, I love that shot of the Kidgel guard that's slightly waiting for its cue, but that's okay. But the Colonel Lethbridge Stewart is brave. He's tough. He's pragmatic, but he's very, very open-minded, and he becomes blimpier. That's probably because everybody realised that Nicholas Courtney was very dryly funny and very good at deadpan comedy, and why not use what your actors do? And that's fine. But I utterly sympathise with anybody who prefers their brigadier to be a tough soldier. I actually like this double act as well, as Mr. Ollis, the sort of taciturn game warden who for whom this is all a bit avant-garde. And as I say, Laurie is actually quite an ebullient fellow, and a bit of a sort of cheery Welsh, song and dance man. But I think he's rather lovely as this sort of fairly straightforward, prosaic character. I love that image of Troughton and Benton being escorted by the Gel Guards, which is of course on the back cover of the Target book, which has Omega with fire coming from his fingers, which I know in the Haydock household was considered to be a literal thing. Like we talked of Omega having fire coming through his fingers, and didn't realise it was actually it was metaphorical. It was there as a striking image. I do like that shot of the Brigadier and Mr. Ollis, and I like does he say you will consider yourself under my command? I like that. It's that kind of Dad's Army, sort of British pluck thing of going, we've got what is he, a game warden and a senior officer. Just go, well, it's just us. I think that and the perspective shot or whatever it is of those doors, those giant doors in the wall of the mountain is excellent, and I love that shot of the two Gel Guards. Unfortunately, one of them's skirt's ridden up a little bit, and you can see it's a sort of man walking along. They're not the greatest, and yet they have occasion where they look good. They're actually a good visual, but then they start moving. But I love that image of Troughton and Benton going into the cave. Of them being flanked by the Gel Guards. I love Troughton stamping on Benton's foot. I mean, you can see it on occasion where Jamie was supposed to be with Troughton. It's a very similar relationship. But I love that John Levine's about, and they go, okay, well, give it John, let him do it. And yes. I love Troughton's sort of wounded dignity that he has as well, because he looks like this sort of slightly Chaplin-esque, trampy figure. But he could try and he doesn't have what Pertwee had. Pertwee looks regal and magnificent in a fancy dress costume, whereas Troughton looks slightly battered, and like he's fallen out of a tumble dryer. So Pertwee has this innate authority, whereas Troughton has this sort of faked authority, if you like, to try. But of course it's very clever, because the layers is that fake is a fake upon another fake of the sort of childish thing that masks a whirring intelligence, which is why I really warmed to Troughton so much, because there's so many layers. Omega looks great on camera, and they shoot him quite well. But look, that set, the sort of paint splatter on the bit above the stairs, the entranceway is, it's the bare minimum, really. This stuff's all great. Charging about a quarry with a double-barreled shotgun. We'll take them by storm, says the Brigadier. Me and you. But that's Doctor Who, isn't it? Two men, probably with 24 shots between them, will storm the castle of the alien intelligence, in the same way that a handful of BBC employees and a very small cast will create a netherworld created from the mind of one of the most sophisticated beings in the universe, on a budget of tuppence halfpenny. And so even where it doesn't quite, I only get cross with Doctor Who if it's lazy. I never get cross with Doctor Who if it reaches for the stars and gets as far as your bedroom ceiling. Do you know what I mean? At least it's its fingertips are at full stretch. I feel some of the design of this is a little bit lazy, or maybe it's that Roger Liminton wasn't the right fit. Because, as I say, I like his work on Carnival of Monsters, but that is a bit more kooky. I like Joe's costume in this. It's all nice and blue, which suggests it's probably yellow CSO, isn't it? Because she'd have disappeared, as with Troughton's shirt. So Bob Baker and Dave Martin, who wrote this, always did seem to write, with a filmic imagination. Now, it's up to us to decide whether that is, not being hampered by the limitations of television production / reality, or whether actually better writers would go, well, no, what's achievable with the technology that we have? What can the BBC do? Which I think people like, Robert Holmes was very good at going, right, what can we do? He says Omega. Oh, well, John Levine, you'll get on with my Oscar. But Terence Dix, who was Bob and Dave's script editors, said they were in the A League, and he said Malcolm Hulke was in the B League. So he really warmed to Bob and Dave, and obviously loved their imagination, but a lot of their stories are ones that seem, on occasion, to be beyond the production team, shall we say. I suppose it depends what you think Doctor Who should be doing, and I suppose I'm talking myself out of this. I don't think Doctor Who should be playing it safe. Why the hell? Well, you're Doctor Who. Don't do what everything else tries to do, but by the same token, also be a little bit cautious so that you don't lose the audience. But it didn't lose the audience, did it? When I was young, this was hugely, hugely exciting and imaginative and beguiling. There's a lot of talking in this cell, though, isn't there? Do they do contact now? I like this. That's great. And there's something that has endured, isn't it? And I there is something you can get a metaphor out of this idea of, if you think hard enough, you can sort of create your own world. My other half is very like that about. She doesn't think you can make a door in an alien space wall. And I love the fact it's literally just a door. But I kind of like that. Don't like that CSO. It is yellow CSO, isn't it? I quite like the beep, boop, 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 boop music as well. It seems to me to fit the production. This sort of fairy tale Netherland atmosphere, and it's quite memorable on the ear. But it's got a bit repetitive now, hasn't it? Because we've kind of already had this sort of thing when Dr. Tyler made a break for it last week. But I suppose now we're with Omega. There's not a whacking great amount of plot left, really. He wants to get into our universe, and they don't want to let him. I love that. That's very, Troughton sticks his head round the corner, Pertwee sticks his head slightly higher. And they're a great contrast because of their different sizes as well. And just the different body language, the way that they hold each other. Troughton is sort of bent and creeps around, scampers around, whereas Pertwee is, strides into danger with all his dignity. Now, in the book, this is a double-headed coin, but I don't think that's clear in the TV version, is it? Pertwee just loses the coin toss, but I don't think it's ever said that's a double-headed coin. Although him saying what would be the point suggests it's always a fix. But I like the idea of a double-headed coin. I don't know why, as a kid, we used to do heads and tails and things like that all the time. And the idea that you had a thing that was a double-headed coin was like just a slight twist on the everyday, and that was always sort of slightly quite exciting because you could get an angle on that because you're a kid. The lighting in here is quite nice. Brilliant mask for Omega. I wonder if now. And I know Stephen Thorne, who I met a few times and very much enjoyed the company of. He was a nice man. Felt that, and I think he gets a bit of stick that his performances are a bit shouty. I think Omega is on the edge of sanity, and he is all powerful, and I kind of think it works, especially in the next episode when he sort of loses temper and the camera shakes. But we'll talk about that. But he hasn't had anybody to talk to, and in fact, funny, didn't I say Laurie Webb makes sure he sings to himself when he doesn't see anybody all day because he's 98 and lives on his own, so as not to lose his voice. So maybe that's what Omega's been doing, because he hasn't got anybody to talk to. He's been doing Shakespearean acting. But it is a performance that's gone up to 11. But I think you can kind of, and he has got a great voice, and it is a brilliant costume. So I forgive Steve Thorne, especially as he always rather berated himself for it. That's a great shot. I love everybody charging out of it. I love this gang. There's a few pictures of, these guys escaping the explosions and stuff. And I like there's two soldiers, the gamekeeper guy, Joe in her costume, and the scientist in his, tweedy scientist costume. I like that sort of incongruous gang. This bevy of sort of unlike unusual heroes, as it were. I think I just like all the characters. I think they're all. Gosh, I've met all of those. There's 5 people on screen, and I've met them all. My 7-year-old self in the playground would have been delighted. And I've even met, who are the gel guards? There's Ricky Newby and. I remember that shot of Joe with the explosion is on the Doctor Who 40th anniversary compilation that they did at the start of the VHSs to the orbital music. That shot of Joe. Anyway, now oddly, I remember when I read the book of this after I'd seen the TV series, I didn't remember this bit at all. And so then when I've got it on video, this was all new to me. And it's it's a film sequence, and it's nicely done. And of course, it looks magnificent because it's on film, and that's Alan Chun's there as the phantom beast from Omega's mind or whatever. But I had no memory at all of it from when I watched it as a kid, which is extraordinary, because I remembered everything else. I remembered that the Time Lord sitting down had a beard. I remember, William Hartnell in his pyramid-y thing and all of that. Yeah, so, and isn't it a shame? I mean, I think it's quite nice that Hartnell's in black and white, although I think if you've invented time travel, I think you could have invented colour television. But maybe it's an artistic choice. But it's actually quite nice seeing Hartnell in black and white. But it is weird, too, seeing him in colour, because we don't have colour William Hartnell in Doctor Who at all. I know stuff's been recolorized now that looks amazing. There's some stuff online that's amazing. But, just having Hartnell in colour is quite odd. I just wish we had a close-up. But yeah, I didn't remember this at all. I mean, it's quite simply done. That's an effective mask. There's no set required there at all. Just a bit of a scrap on an Ealing stage. But it's kind of, again, this is kind of padding for a story that is a huge celebration. It's kind of like we've got the situation, but I'm not necessarily sure it sustains itself. That's not a complaint. There's loads of Doctor Who like that. And I've got to keep talking because much as I pressed the button to stop it skipping the closing credits, thanks BritBox, I pressed the button 100 times then, and it jumped anyway. So now I'm furious because I like reading the credits and commentating along to them. And if you're watching along, I've now skipped past them. Even Bernard is annoyed. He's looking at me now, making noises. He's making noises because he's not getting any attention from me, and I've been talking about Doctor Who for half an hour. But I like to think I'm gonna impose my will, like Omega, upon him. And go, no, he's annoyed about the credits. Up you get, Bern. Up. He's doing that. He has a slight habit of sort of standing at the sofa, kind of going, I want to either get on you or jump up or do something, but I'm not going to actually do it. So then I say, you've got to do it. And he goes, well, no, I'm going to stand here a bit gormlessly instead. And I don't know what that is. Anyway, I love you, Bernard. He's gone to his bed now. And now he's making me feel guilty because I feel like I've ignored him, even though I was beckoning him to me. Anyway, sorry you didn't get well, I mean, you can't really hear what's going on anyway, but the music did cut out because of this, presaging the collapse of modern civilization. We are encouraged not to watch the credits for things anymore, and it makes me very, very sad. But I like the fact that the credits credit the Doctors first. I remember when Doctor Who magazine ran the episode guide for the two Doctors, and it said, the Doctor, Colin Baker, Perry, Nicola Bryant, the Doctor, Patrick Troughton. I was like, I do hope that Patrick Troughton, because I'd forgotten, there was no videos in those days. I'd seen the story. I hope Patrick Troughton was credited above the companion. He's the Doctor, and I was prepared to be all angry, but no, Patrick Troughton gets second billing in the two Doctors, as is right. I like the fact that the Doctors are all credited, before, because sometimes in terms of contractually and all of that sort of things, series regulars get billed before everybody, even if it's former series regulars or whatever. But I like the Doctor Who tradition of going, no. If you're the Doctor, you get credited first, or now if you're getting an intro at the end, and introducing so and so. I thought they did the credits very well on the Power of the Doctor, actually, because they had all sorts of little different things that they had to wrangle, and I think they got them all right. But I'm sure I'll talk about that when I wang on through the credits of that, when somebody chooses the Power of the Doctor for Happy Times and Places Year 10 or whatever. No, surely not. So yes, I mean, it's not perfect, is it? The three Doctors, and there was a bit of padding there, but I think it gets by on, well, you have the sense of occasion, Time Lords, birth of the Time Lords, and I think that's quite a big moment of Omega revealing that, and us revealing who he is, and I think that the seismic nature of that sort of propels you through, some of the standing around talking, and then the standing around fighting in a pre-film sequence, and the sheer charm of that bevy of characters, the juxtaposition of the mundane and the spectacular that door, and the lovely banter between Troughton and Pertwee, which is a winner. And the regulars all being on form. I like Cromer. I don't know why. I think I was probably conditioned to like Cromer because it was spoken of very fondly in Doctor Who magazine, as though, it's that brilliant joke where the Brigadier thinks it's Cromer. And of course, it's so good that they chose Cromer, because now we can say, well, you watch a scene in Omega's palace and you can go, well, I'm pretty sure that's Chroma Key. So it's one of those little happy accidents. But and I quite like the joke of the blimpish military guy denying what is real because he can't accept it. Were it not for the fact that, well, if I then think about it for 10 seconds and go, but he's seen everything. He's seen invasion by, spaghetti monsters. He's seen the devil manifest itself in a village church. He's seen a Chinese dragon appear before an American ambassador. He's seen, he's seen an auton in a safe. All of that. And now he's going, but this building can't have moved to outside. And also, is it any less likely? Is it any easier to move a building, to dematerialize a building and transport it to Chroma, than it is to dematerialize a building and transform it into another universe, another planet, or whatever? Surely it's the dematerialization and rematerialization that's the issue, not the geographical location. I have conjured you out of nowhere. A castle. A castle? No. I'm pretty sure it's a bungalow. No, it's the conjuring. That's the. I know I'd accept a 2 up, 2 down, but a castle, that's beyond the realms of my imagination. But still, it's jolly. It zips along and it is charming. Even though there's padding and some atrocious design. It's its sheer charm that carries it through. But I think my favourite thing about it is Omega, the look of Omega. I like Stephen Thorne's performance too, but I just think the idea that he's from the birth of the Time Lords. Now you can say that they've done multi-Doctor stories, to death a bit, and they do sort of Time Lord mythology stuff. Has happened a lot of times now. But at this point in the show's history, we've seen the Time Lords on Gallifrey. We don't even know it's called Gallifrey at the moment. In the War Games and Colony in Space. We've had the bowler-hatted guy, of course, in Terror of the Autons, but he was disguising his chameleon circuit to disguised him as a city gent. But the Time Lords themselves. And now we're back on Gallifrey with the Hammy HQ. But then this other guy comes in and he looks magnificent and he's tall and he's got this booming voice, and he's the guy that's captured the Doctor. He's the guy that's caused the Time Lords to be involved. He's the guy that's meant we need not 1 but 2 but 3 Doctors. Well, it'd be a bit annoying if he was just Spacey Magoo from the planet Penge or whatever. He is Omega, the founder of the solar engineer who kicked the Time Lords into their lofty position. And that, to me, seems to be an appropriate level of threat for this 3 Doctors story. It's an attempt to give some scope to the series and to give it a little nod without doing anything, that makes people go, do I have to have watched this before? Because of course you don't, because we don't know any of this. This is all new to everybody. So it's it's mythology, but without being tied up in existing mythology or whatever. Apart from that, well, the Doctor's a Time Lord, but that's easily digestible. And I think it's a great costume. I think it's a great look. So yes, Omega. Who Omega is, what Omega represents in the story, but also that beautiful, beautiful design. What does Siobhan Gallichan like from episode 3? I think we could tell Siobhan and I are perhaps coming at this from slightly different angles, which is absolutely fine. So I expect not to be successful. But But who knows? We might find a point of singularity.
Part 3. This is an odd one. But the more I think about it, the more right it seems. It's Omega's palace, of all things. I know in Terence's novel it was a glorious thing, and in this it's just a pair of doors leaning up against a cliff wall. But it's the inside I like. Again, it's a memory thing, I'm guessing. A nostalgia thing? I don't know. From when I first watched this, and that was, like I say, on transmission, original transmission. But there's something about it. It's magical. It almost is the fairy tale place. And Dudley Simpson's music for that, the corridor music, if you like, the twinkly music, it just makes the whole thing seem right. And again, cosy. That's a word you could just describe the three doctors as, cosy. Yeah, so odd one, but there we go. It's Omega's palace, especially the corridors and the music.
Ah, well, I mean, I quite like the music, but I actually am... There's part of me that's slightly pleased that the thing that I sort of said was not very good is the thing that Siobhan has chosen, because Siobhan was a wee bairn when this was on, so remembers it at the time. So it was good enough to capture a kid. And therefore, whatever my adult sensibilities are about the set design and the filming within Omega's palace, doesn't matter, because it did its job at the time that it was broadcast. Yeah, as I say, I will never be its greatest fan of a lot of the choices that take place in the studio work in Omega's palace, and yet for somebody else, it's the best thing about the episode. And isn't that rather glorious? Because I can never pretend that some of the things that I choose in this are objective, and I think anybody that sort of loftily declares their own stylistic preferences to be objectively better. Now, I think you can sometimes say, technical achievements are, objectively better, and you can perhaps break a script down and go, just looking at that practically. But actually, that doesn't matter, because you could have the best structured script in the world, but it could still not dance in the way that something a bit more scattershot and last minute or compromised or whatever, because Doctor Who is not something we can often assess objectively, because of when we're first introduced. Stories are influenced, I think, by when we're first introduced to them, by where we are at the time that we're watching them, by where we were at the time when we were watching them, but by where we are in our lives now, by what Doctor Who is doing right now and what Doctor Who is doing there. So many different stimuli, so many different, twists of the kaleidoscope or the viewfinder will skew how we refract the images and interpret them and how they hit us emotionally. And that's also going to depend on who we are and when and where we're from and what we've been through. And that's why Doctor Who is a strange sort of catalogue of our lives, because I don't just watch Doctor Who. Doctor Who has been with me all of my life, and I remember where and when I was introduced to certain things. I mean, I broke off, didn't I, when I was talking about the fire in the fingers? It was years later that I discovered, and I didn't discover it. I read in a magazine, I think it must have been in a DWM, that those hands of Omega's on the cover are actually hands, from a comic strip that have been sort of imported and used for the cover of the book, because why waste a good pair of hands when you've got a good pair of hands? And so the fiery fingers metaphor is actually sort of there for a sort of practical shortcut as well. But it is a lovely metaphor. But that practical but I love the fact that that misconception we had in our home that one was that the Zygons can sting people, because there's that picture of the photo of the Zygon sort of reaching out and Tom Baker clutching his head. It was like, oh yeah, they sting you. And was there a thing called Sting of the Zygons? But we had a thing, yeah. But I thought it was a thing that, you know, when I watched Terror of the Zygons, you know, the Zygons would just be touching people, they'd be getting stung, you know, a bit like the Triffids or something like that, you know, because that was around at the time that I was growing up. And in the same way, the Omega had fiery fingers, so I imagine this guy that, you know, that's what you imagine a Doctor Who monster would do, and especially one that would get together the three Doctors, fiery fingers. But no, it was on the cover just as a sort of metaphorical representation of power. But it was also on the cover because it was a practical shortcut as a result of the artist already having that thing to hand and placing it there. So it's lovely that there's so many different layers to that thing that was a misapprehension in the first place, but is also part and parcel of my assimilation and experience of the story. And I'm sure we've all got those things that are unique to us. So our perceptions of every story are unique to us because of you know, how we come to Doctor Who. But it's you know, it's more profound than, because all of our perceptions of everything are unique to us. But with Doctor Who, we also have this commonality of we all know it, we all watch it, we all know what we're talking about when we say Sergeant Benton and Mr. Ollis and all of that sort of thing. So we all basically, what I'm saying is, we all create a world through our own perception, and I think you'll find that reflects the themes of the three Doctors rather well. And so I shall depart with a flourish, with a spring in my step, and fire coming out my fingers. Well, welcome back, everybody, and it's time for the final part of the Three Doctors. It's been we've been in the throes of Doctor Who's 59th anniversary, but you'll be listening to this sometime after that. No doubt, but you know, we won't have got to the 60th anniversary yet. So there's an exciting build-up now, isn't there? Another landmark. Weird, because it seems to me not that long ago that it was the 50th, which seemed a kind of as big as Doctor Who could ever get. And now the 60th, that's going to be interesting. But I remember the 20th. You know, the 20th was big, and it was, I mean, that was when I was, you know, becoming a fan. And it sort of defined my fandom. A lot of the stuff that happened around that period, it was when I went from boy to fan, you know, and I think aware and impressed that you know, Doctor Who was very much embedded in the cultural DNA and was something that, you know, would have a landmark. So yeah, the 20th anniversary. But I remember the Five Faces of Doctor Who before that as well, of course, which this was part of. But, you know, it was all these sort of moments that sort of... It was when we looked back to the past with some sort of sense of awe and appreciation. And then something happened which meant that we looked at the past. Well, I didn't. But people looked at the past, you know, with a sense of superiority, sort of taking credit for all the achievements that had happened betwixt then and now, despite having played no part in them. Which I always think is a you know, an odd thing to do. It's a bit like people who are very cocky about how good their football team are, and it's like, but you weren't actually actively involved in any of that. So anyway, so yes, I'm proud in Doctor Who, but I won't be standing on the tram going, who are you? Who fans am I? You know, or whatever. Who are you? But anyway, I'm pleased to come to this final instalment of the Three Doctors, the not really 10th anniversary story, but the story from the 10th season that has the Three Doctors in it, which you know, was an amazing thing to do at that time. And, you know, set the precedent for something that's now happened loads and we get a bit blasé about. But this seems to me, and because William Hartnell's in it, I think, you know, it's his last performance as the Doctor, last performance ever, I think. I think there's something still rather sort of magical and mysterious about it. So let's choose to start. I'm going to watch from the beginning on my BritBox. You may have a DVD or a Blu-ray, whichever. I wish you luck as we start proceedings in 3, 2, 1. Well, you will not believe the gap between then and now. Me saying press play or whatever, 3, 2, 1 now, and actual now. I've already done this introduction, having had plenty of trouble having to connect a remote sound device to a projector to a Fire Stick, blah 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 blah. And this is the simpler way, because I'm not getting discs out of boxes. And I was going, and I would have watched this on a black and white portable television. And I was just doing all that, explaining that and going, but I must have watched it in black and white, even though I remember John Pertwee's black leather gloves and I remember the colour of his jacket, but that must have been from pictures because we didn't have a colour telly at this point. And then a thing flashes up and says, we're going to install your software update now. I just want to watch television. So yeah, some of the Three Doctors may look like it was made on knackered old technology, but do you know what? At least when something has buttons to press, you either, you can switch it on and off. It doesn't suddenly deny you that privilege. So I'm much more acoustic in my technology. Much more. Anyway, I was thinking on my walk today that I haven't mentioned during this sojourn into Three Doctorsville that of course that Chris Achilleos cover was usurped by a later cover, which I remember finding a couple of copies in the school library, and one was Doctor Who and the Cybermen, which, having had that beautiful picture of Troughton, it's a picture of Troughton from the Three Doctors actually, and an invasion Cyberman, I was shocked to see had these things that looked like awful Cybermen that weren't looking like the proper Cybermen. I think Bill Donohoe had done this new cover, which is the moon and a couple of Cybermen, but those Cybermen are actually what the Cybermen in the Moonbase look like, but not to me. The Cybermen in the Moonbase would look like invasion Cybermen because, and it's not even called the Moonbase; it's called Doctor Who and the Cybermen. But also the book of the Three Doctors. I love the way that these two are, because they do wind each other up, but they're communicating, and Troughton blowing his cheeks is lovely. And I love this idea of Omega's mood affecting the very environment. I think that's beautiful, and I think the whole thing about his id keeping the world together is fascinating. And I like this, the way that it's a very Troughton thing to do. He does that. He manipulates, he pokes to see, but never, not always with a plan, just to see what will happen. I sometimes resist that idea that Troughton is Machiavellian, and I sometimes just think it's slightly thoughtless writing, like in Tomb, when he seems to, for no reason, just do the things that cause trouble. But that's because Troughton's Doctor, I think, is maybe too good an actor that you think, well, he can't be up to something. He's this sort of childish guy, but actually, no, he's manipulative. He's very interesting. He is dark, and Troughton, of course, has that wonderful resonance. I love that shot. I think this Omega costume is great, and the beautiful red lighting in this is very, very nice. It's a fantastic mask. But I remember the other Three Doctors book, which was not the one that I had. And this was when I had this sort of thing as a fan going, so do I have to get the books that have got different covers? I never did. I've never had all the ones with all the different covers. And as I'm saying that out loud, I'm kind of regretting that and thinking, what kind of a fan am I? But I'm a real fan of the original targets, really. That's why. But then those reprints, because I have got some. I've got the John Geary Sea Devils because I was too young for the original one. So yeah, and the reprint of Robot. But anyway, no, I didn't get the reprint of the Three Doctors. And I remember at the time thinking the picture of Troughton looked wrong on it. And it's actually a picture of Troughton as Salamander. That's why it's wrong, because it's that somebody had obviously given the artist Patrick Troughton in Doctor Who picture, but it's him as Salamander. So he looks terrible on the cover, even though it's a really good painting. And Pertwee looks good. And Hartnell is in his Astrakhan. I think it's one of the Unearthly Child pictures. But I remember there was a letter to Doctor Who magazine at the time, or that said, that this cover is bad. Pertwee looks too something, can't remember. Troughton looks too bad, and that works. That words for look. He looks like a baddie, and it's a bit bad. And Hartnell looks too Welsh. And until you look at it, you go, but what do you mean he looks like... Oh, he does a bit. So I've always remembered that letter rather fondly. I don't know how you can look Welsh, but I can see what the person was driving at. And I think that's an all-time classic letter to Doctor Who magazine. Well, it must be, because I've remembered it after all these years. This way that Omega is shot in the foreground is very nice, because it's emphasising his height. He's taller even than Pertwee. And Pertwee is tall, and he's towering over Troughton. So that's the use of the sort of size, the use of these three performers. Is making up for the shortcomings of what they're standing in front of. And I like the fact that now you see this is going to be hard pressed to beat. As a favourite moment. I think this is a brilliant Doctor Who idea. Troughton's superb as well. They're both superb, actually. Each one reacting in a way that complements and contrasts to the other, but each of them emphasising, the great weight of it. And isn't it fascinating that Pertwee, the comedian, is the one who's giving it the sort of dramatic, straight-faced, oh my goodness, this is deadly serious stuff, and Troughton giving it the oh my giddy aunt, I'm this is I'm spooked by this. But what a wonderful idea this is, that is so Doctor Who-y, and he lets out quite a pitiful shriek, which I think really works. I do think Stephen Thorne is occasionally shouty, and as I said earlier in an earlier instalment, I felt a bit bad for him that he gave himself a hard time. It was almost like he'd read a few of the reviews, because he did. There was a phase when it was de rigueur and Doctor Who fandom sort of say Stephen Thorne's a bit shouty because Azar's a bit shouty and Eldred's a bit shouty. But I think that cry that he does is sort of rips the fabric of his world apart. But that idea of somebody who only exists through the force of his own will is such a great Doctor Who idea. And of course, it completely ties in with this, that he's built this world from his imagination. And that's quite a philosophical idea, because we all create the world from our imagination. Now, we don't do it in the Doctor Who way, because we haven't conjured the solid objects, but our own perspective. The world is seen through our own ego, if you like, as well. And if we're not careful, that can be malign and destructive, because we want to shape the world to fit what we want rather than fit into the world. I think it speaks to all sorts of fascinating possibilities that are kind of half explored here, but I think as a metaphor for life and existence, it's really interesting. For using science fiction to do that, I think is great. It's better than kind of a monster of the week. But also it adds a huge level of tragedy to bombastic, all-powerful solar engineer Omega, who bless him, is so sort of sad that the only reason he exists is through the force of his own will. And what does that say about a person's existence? And I think that's really sad. And compelling and interesting, and a cut above some of the ideas I think were sometimes served in Doctor Who. Even though this is a production that sometimes I don't think matches the ambitions of the script and the writers. But I think I've mentioned this on other occasions, maybe even earlier in this, is that how culpable are Bob Baker and Dave Martin in this, in the sense that that's a very sort of contrived, I'm caught between the two doctors bit of blocking, but it's kind of charming, and I love everyone involved. And I do like the gel guards when the one who's wobbling up and down there should stop it. I interrupted myself a couple of episodes ago and was going, how many of these people have I met? And I think I've met most of the gel guards as well. Yes, Graham Lehman. We not doesn't normally have a beard when he's in Doctor Who. So I wonder if he was doing something else round about now. I think I might do a little bit on Graham Lehman at some. I might drop his son a line, who I don't know. I've just met that once, but to find out a bit more about him and a bit more about his keenness to perform, even though he had those mobility issues. I love Troughton's braces. Braces are always more fun, I think, to see on other people than they are to wear. I think you've got I think there's a knack to pulling them off. I did occasionally wear them when I was at university, but I'd either hitch them too high or too low. But they're a nice idea, aren't they? So yes, that Three Doctors cover it's funny as being a Doctor Who fan, you sort of like what you're used to, and I suddenly saw that as a slight step too far into the modern age. What was wrong with the old covers? It's amazing. I don't know if this is just me, but I do sort of I've spent a lot of time sort of resisting change or going on. I find comfort in that thing from before. I feel uncomfortable with that being changed or erased or moved on from. I see it as an insult to the things that have gone before, and I was talking about that in the introduction about actually, I look back with appreciation to the things that paved the way. Now this is at least a slightly better shot of Hartnell. I mean, everything's sort of reflected in the crew and everything are reflected in the TV screen, but at least we get a close up of Hartnell here. I'm sure it's possible to sort of pause it to get a shot of him, but I know because he looks slightly different in those group shots, and that's what I think is quite sad, as I say, that we don't have a close-up of him, that we don't sort of really have a proper account of, because they were all three of them together when they took those publicity photos, and it's actually it is the Hartnell of the publicity photos who's on the cover of the original, the Achilleos cover, and he does look slightly different from the Hartnell we know, because he's old and ill, and in those photos he looks sort of slightly sort of more rounded in the face, but they were there, and I wonder how much chitter chatter there was, how he was on the day. Because you don't actually see them all together in the episode, which you think, oh, that's a mistake. It's like he's so near and yet he's so far, and yet there is, obviously a session where they're all together, just for that, that those publicity shots. And I'd have liked a bit more of an insight into that. Nobody really, I don't think, has given account of that day or that session. Probably only an hour. And there were, I remember Bob Baker and Dave Martin, I think, had sort of said, oh, the reason this story came about was because William Hartnell was knocking on the door and asking for work. Well, history tells us we know that didn't happen. It's more likely the Terence Dicks version. Well, no, I mean the Bob Baker version did not happen. Hartnell was at home and seemed somebody called him on a good day. And then they wrote the script, and then when they called him back, his wife went, what? Oh, no, I think you just got me on a good day. He's not going to be able to do this. But anyway, whatever happened, his ultimate input is very, very limited. But he's still there. He's, in that Ealing Film Studio, not in his garage. But again, we don't have any behind-the-scenes shots of that. We don't really have many reports from that day to get much of an angle on Hartnell's last sort of days as an actor and his last contributions to Doctor Who. So even though he's in it, and even though it seems amazing that he's in it, even though he hadn't been in it that long ago, it still seems, because it was the first days of Doctor Who and because it was black and white and because Hartnell was dead before I was born, it seemed the idea that he'd almost even touched anything that was in colour seems like, he has crossed some sort of time bridge, and yet not well enough for the reception not to be too fuzzy for us to actually completely get a full and sort of tangible representation of it. Even though he's in all 4 episodes, he's never quite there. The fact that he's not in the videotape studio, but the fact that also all the film stuff is on a monitor. So he's still. He was the Doctor that was dead before I was born, so he was the Doctor that to me was always dead. But even in in this thing that he's sort of tangible in, he's just kind of out of reach, which I think gives it a sort of tragic, not tragic, but a sort of melancholic aspect to Hartnell's contribution, which, you know, is offset by the utter joy of Troughton and Pertwee being so brilliant together. And by all accounts, you know, as I said, not necessarily initially a meeting of method, if not mind, and yet, you know, they then proved to be a great double act at conventions, and John encouraged Pat to do it, and the kind of rapport between them, the catty rapport between them is rather fun, and they're a great contrast, and yet they are both Doctor Who, you know, and shows the vast possibilities of the part that, you know, still be true to the essence of the character, and yet be totally different interpretations of the role. Now this is a bit that I remember watching this when I had it on, you know, bootleg video. Well, not bootleg, it was just a recording. It was a recording from the Five Faces, I think. So, you know, nice, good quality, but being quite sort of shocked at something that you don't get in this version now. And I'm not sure what I think about that, because I think they've, in the sound of the version that we have now, the restored, tarted up, beautiful, gorgeous, done with such care and precision and expertise and hard work and hours above and beyond the call of duty. I think I'm right in saying that they have taken out the fact that when all of these characters walk through, you then hear their footsteps going down the other side, which sort of makes you go, I mean, come on, this is a landmark production. It's the opening of the season, but it's in many ways so careless. I like the fact that Mr. Ollis refuses to go first. He's by far the sort of least important and high-profile character, but they still don't go, you're the least important character, you go first. He goes, no, I'm definitely not doing it. So, and I like the way that each of the characters sort of walks through the singularity thing in a way that reflects their character. You know, he sort of does this sort of slightly, and then he goes, oh, you know, sorry, and then goes through quite quickly. But Benton sort of protests because he wants to stay and do his duty. So, but no, he goes through. And then the Brigadier, doesn't he? He salutes. So even though it's quite drawn out, it does mean that everybody gets a moment. And I love the fact that the Brigadier says, "Come on, Joe." He normally calls her Miss Grant, but this is emphasising, you know, this is as big as it gets. This is the two doctors, not just one doctor. The doctors are going to sacrifice themselves to, you know, this big villain, the biggest villain we've ever had, a Time Lord villain, the first Time Lord. So this is a big deal, and it's emphasised by the Brigadier going, Joe. I remember being slightly surprised at this line because I'd read an interview with Nicholas Courtney. Oh no, it's not this line. Here, I like the salute, and again, there's footsteps there. But I remember reading an interview with Nicholas Courtney when it was in Radio Times 20th Anniversary magazine or one of those, and it said, you know, people ask me who my favourite Doctor is, and I say, splendid chaps, all of them. And then he uses that line. It's not here. It's in the Five Doctors, isn't it? And I was like, oh, so that's not what you say, Nicholas Courtney. That's what the Brigadier says in an episode of Doctor Who. So maybe it wasn't. Anyway, I remember hearing it first from Nicholas Courtney and then seeing the Brigadier do it. I love the fact that, well, one, that this doesn't work, that Omega sort of goes, nah. I also love the fact that Omega is brought down by something as prosaic as a recorder. Yes, it's a recorder caught in the time-space doodah of the TARDIS or whatever, but it's a very Doctor Who-y thing. You know, people hate that bit of the Time Monster where it's a bottle of wine and a mug of tea that do a time experiment, and that is a bit silly. But this, I understand the logic of this. It's something that hasn't converted to antimatter because it fell into the TARDIS. Don't quite know how, but it doesn't matter. But the fact that it is a sort of prosaic, silly object that brings down this great being is a very Doctor Who idea, something very down to earth and very normal. We can another source of energy. Oh, and that's nice. It's that, yeah, the energy comes from, and we go, I actually like Roy Purcell's performance as the president, but it is a performance of a certain type. It's striding around in a cape, being very serious. He's not really a person. He's fulfilling a role and a function, but he's doing it with a great stage actor's bearing and diction and presence and all those sorts of things. That so you wouldn't really go for that today, but I like it in the context that it is, and I think he's a nice solid performer that does all the stuff properly. And it's nice to see Graham Lehman in his last Doctor Who, but I know I've talked about him at length in the Macra Terror and the Seeds of Death commentaries and Fury from the Deep. I've done all his stories bar Colony in Space. I love the fact that Mr. Ollie's Laurie is great at doing this slightly pissed off confusion thing. So yes, the footsteps down the back of the wall of singularity have been minimized by the restoration to make it better. But I think they're interesting artifacts of the original production. So I'm not sure I'm wild about them being minimized, because that to me crosses a line, and I can count the restoration team amongst very good friends of mine. But I understand the reason for doing it. I equally understand the reason for not doing it, and I think there are good arguments in both, and there are flawed arguments in both. You can see the camera in the screen here, but I think I prefer mine. What the audience at the time would have heard. But anyway, the pictures are beautiful. The sound's much better mixed. Oh, Troughton! I love the way even Troughton even waves. And I think they got rid of his reflection in the console as well, didn't they? They've tidied up a few bits of the Three Doctors, which I suppose makes it better because it is quite a tatty production. It's extraordinary that Doctor Who could do that. It is one of the tattiest Doctor Who productions, and it's the one where they've got to the trouble of getting all three Doctors together, and they go, should we bother to give the place a lick of paint? Not really. Just stick a telly on the wall and stick some bubble wraps on some flats. I loved John Levine's little sort of slightly put upon look there of going, oh, but what am I supposed to do? He's great at making Benton sort of lovably inept. He's like a kind of loyal dog who you kind of feel sorry for, but would stay by your side through thick and thin. I do love Sergeant Benton. And I remember not really getting this when I watched it first, and my brother's explaining, the Doctor's been exiled to Earth, and this is his release from that. And then that suddenly made sense to me of what the unit thing was about. I hadn't realised it had been as sort of formalised as that. And that's an interesting thing to think about when we think of the sort of timeline of Doctor Who. Because now, if they did a thing like that, said, right, the Doctor's going to be exiled to Earth, we go, hang on, you're changing the format here. But again, because this had happened before I was born, it was part of the show's history, and so just part of its interesting and rich tapestry of this eclectic and changeable series of variety. But now I think we would be much more cautious of that, going, hang on, you're not quite doing the thing. Doctor Who has been a program at travelling through space and time, and this much loved era began with you're not allowed to travel through space and time anymore. Hello, Pat. I'm about to write Christmas cards to each of these two, lovely Pat and lovely Laurie, who live not far away from each other, and delightfully get the end of the episode. And I think it's one of the great episode endings in the whole of Doctor Who. One, I love the fact that Pat gets the final shot. Lenny Mayne does that with Wendy Danvers, who's also a nonagenarian Doctor Who survivor at the end of Curse of Peladon. Amazonia getting the close up of the TARDIS taking off, having delivered a Doctor Who. But I love that the final shot is of Pat, which is lovely. Pat Robinson, she's called really, but Patricia Pryor, widow of Rex Robinson, Dr. Tyler, and Laurie Webb there as Mr. Ollis. I think they're the Hollises, aren't they? In the book. Ollis seems like even the name is speaking in a sort of cod regional accent as these characters sort of doing these things. So we'll call him Mr. Ollis. You mean Hollis, don't you? Yeah, Hollis. So it's almost like the credits and the script have sort of rendered the name in dialect rather than as it actually is. I've never come across an Ollis. I know many are Hollis. And yeah, I'm sure they're Hollis in the book, or I just added the H because I myself, but I'm sure it's Hollis in the book. But and I remember thinking, was Ollis a mistake until I actually, saw the episodes again years later when I was conscious of such stuff. I hadn't remembered from the Five Faces of Doctor Who whether it was Ollis or Hollis. But I love that ending. I love the way that Laurie opens his mouth as if to tell her and then just goes, "You never believe me, supper ready." I think that's a glorious, glorious moment. So for me, my two choices for this come to me straight away. I don't have to struggle. Much as it's lovely having Hartnell there, much as the Trout and Pertwee combo is as good, if not better, than you could ever have imagined and hoped for. Much as there are some choice lines in there as well. My two favourite things are my favourite thing and my bonus favourite thing. I suppose my favourite thing from the episode. Well, they're both from this episode. So my favourite thing from episode 4 and my bonus thing is also from episode 4. My favourite thing from episode 4 is therefore Omega existing by the force of his will. I think it's a really interesting, fascinating, really philosophically thought through idea that works in terms of the science fiction, but also gives us something to think about if we want to, and reflect about how we create our own world and what that actually means, and then think about what it means for this fictional character in this thing who is this big bombastic creature, all powerful seemingly, but actually is nothing but an idea held together by sort of ego and hope. And I think that opens up all sorts of extraordinary possibilities. It allows for that gorgeous universe-rending wail that could cut a hole through which tear into the fabric of the universe so that a black hole appears of Omega and Stephen Thorne. So good. Brilliant idea, really tragic. Looks slightly better on this than I recall it looking, again, when I was watching as a very self-conscious youth, not when it was on Five Faces Doctor Who, but when I came to revisit it and found it very disappointing. The CSO in that scene, I think, has been slightly improved in restoration. I'm less bothered about that, interestingly, because it makes it slightly easier to watch, because I remember that scene being a bit pony. And you want that scene to be there for the concept and the idea, not to be being distracted by huge fringes on all the CSO elements. And I'm aware that makes me a total hypocrite, because I'm resistant to the diminution of the hobnail boots on wooden steps. That is suggesting a mystical transportation through space and time and antimatter. But yeah, so I love that. And my bonus thing is the thing we have to end on, which is that great ending. I love Mr. Ollis. He's hardly got any lines, but I love his presence in the show. And not that he's... Because Doctor Who can often do sort of down-to-earth working-class characters, and they're there for comic relief, but it's all a bit patronising, and they're all a bit sort of wide-eyed and kind of, I don't really understand this, and I'll do as I'm told. Ollis is kind of... He kind of sort of takes it all in his stride, but not in an awed way, in a kind of, sort of taciturn acceptance and a slight sort of disapproval of all this sort of avant-garde nonsense. Don't want all this rubbish. I always say about my granddad that he was quite a fascinating man, interesting man, very principled man, and very well read, even though he'd left school at, I don't think he'd even properly been educated, and he'd sort of he was in a children's home and all sorts of things, but like cauliflower, like cheese, but put them together, and that was warlockery. So limited in certain ways, but in a way that's sort of strangely kind of admirable, even though it is very sort of closed-minded. But it is in a kind of, well, I've got time for that nonsense kind of way. And I love all of that. I think Laurie captures that so brilliantly, and especially and as I say, when I was going to interview him, I thought he would be like that, a bit of a sort of man of few words, because that's the sort of part. Only he's not at all. He's Lonnie Webb, and he's always lovely, and how are you? And so the fact that he's the complete opposite of that as well, of course, he's an actor. But I think he inhabits that character so well. But then that he opens his mouth and then can't be bothered, and then just goes, "You'd never believe me, woman, supper ready." The perfect ending to a Doctor Who story. The lunacy is over. Can I just have my tea? That's Doctor Who. I've been to a world created by the id of a megalomaniacal, tragic figure that creates gel monsters out of the force of his imagination. And I've been driving around this antimatter world in an Edwardian roadster that is owned by two aspects of the same person, who is a benevolent alien from outer space who has a time-traveling telephone box. And yeah, I'm just going to get on with my life now. Love it. What does Siobhan Gallichan like from episode 4 and from the Three Doctors as a whole?
Part 4. This one. Ooh. I think, excuse me, I think we're going to have to go for the revelation that Omega doesn't have a body anymore. It's horrifying. All that exists now is his will, and it can exist because of where he is. If he isn't there, then his will can't exist. And it's quite horrific, really, when you stop and think about it. It's just a moment of cold horror right in the middle of all this coziness. And it isn't dwelt upon as if to say, oh, the horror. Yeah, Omega goes completely nuts, and understandably. But there's no proper treatise of, oh my God, isn't this dreadful, blah, 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 blah. It's just something that happens. But when you stop and think about it, it's really quite horrific. And my overall thing, I'm going to beg your indulgence on this. The first thing I want to say is it's not smug. This isn't my choice, but the Three Doctors isn't smug, unlike a lot of multi-Doctor stuff. There, especially on the television, it's smug. The Five Doctors was smug. Dimensions in Time was smug. Let's bring everybody else out for the panto walk down. The Three Doctors isn't. It's just the opening story of the 10th season. Yep, Pat and Bill are in it, but it's not a huge thing. I mean, it became a huge thing, but all we had was that, and of course the wonderful 10th anniversary special, the Holy of Holies. But that, like I say, that's not what I'm going to go for. Seeing as, even though this wasn't deliberately planned to be an anniversary story, but we've always thought it is, and seeing as it's the 60th next year, I'm saying next year because hopefully Toby's released this on the 50th anniversary of the Three Doctors. I have no idea. I want to actually go for Doctor Who itself. And I know I'm cheating here, but whilst I was thinking all this through, yes, I've actually thought about it, it occurred to me, I wonder what my life would be like if Doctor Who didn't exist. And I can't imagine it. I genuinely can't. My social life is built around Doctor Who. That's not, it's the initial way I meet with people, and with some people it's the whole, it's what you talk about. But without it, God knows what, I genuinely cannot imagine what my life would be without it. I mean, seriously, to your listeners, just stop and think for a second. If it didn't exist, it never existed, what would your life be like now? So that is my overall thing. Doctor Who itself. I'm sorry, I know it's a cheat, but it's an anniversary story, sort of. So if I can't bung this in here, where can I bung it in? Sorry, Toby.
Oh, do you know what? I've nothing to forgive. I thought that was lovely. Let's address the first bit. I do take the point about the Three Doctors not being smug, and sometimes, and I think it's difficult as Doctor Who's gone on to sort of acknowledge its past and revel in its status without sort of too reverential. And part of Doctor Who's charm almost is that it was sort of knocked together without any sense of its own importance, which is impossible to escape when you've been going 60 years, because it would seem a bit odd if you just went, oh, this old thing. But the 10 years wasn't quite enough to be sort of to look like you're sort of staring at your own navel or patting yourself on the back, especially as, of course, they don't. So yes, I've always been a bit off with the Three Doctors for being a bit tatty and not having much of a sense of occasion in terms of the production. I mean, having the Time Lords back and your enemy as the founder of time travel and all of that, as well as the Three Doctors, there's an attempt at grandiosity there. But the fact that the production is on the tatty, maybe that's a blessing, and if that's the payoff for not being sort of too full of itself, maybe that's maybe be careful what you worry about, Toby. So that's a very interesting perspective. I love the fact that we both chose Omega's existence only through sheer will, and it is a horrifying idea, but that's the beauty of all of this stuff. It's a horrifying idea, but it's a philosophical idea. It's also very sad. I mean, the fact that they do acknowledge that they're having to essentially do the humane thing, which is to destroy Omega, because there's a tragic element to Omega's existence and ability to only exist in that universe, and that's a prisoner of his own mind. I mean, really, which is again a brilliant concept, a really thought-provoking concept, but actually rather a sad one. But it's also funny, and it's also daft, and it's also very cozy, but action-packed and a bit scary. It's yes, please. And this is a story that's nowhere near my favourite. So this is really interesting, because I'm loving this and sort of talking about it and enunciating all of these things that come to mind because of a thought-provoking contribution from Siobhan, and the fact that I'm, forced to do so by commentating along as I'm watching the pictures and trying to articulate what it is that appeals and what it is that beguiles about each particular Doctor Who adventure, and in this case, this one, which then opens Siobhan out to that observation about, gosh, where would we be without Doctor Who? Oh, and yes, this sorry, Siobhan, this has been released slightly before the 50th anniversary of the Three Doctors, but only about a month before, which I think is kind of right, because the story was released a little bit before the 10th anniversary as well. They just at the end of the year before. I'm sort of grasping at straws, and I just fancied. I did do this. I recorded this at around the 59th anniversary of Doctor Who itself. So in a way, it's appropriate to Siobhan's last observation about, think about life without Doctor Who. I cannot think of my life without Doctor Who. It has shaped my life. I mean, part of me, the idea of being a professional Doctor Who fan appalls me, though. This is still my hobby. The fact that it's crossed over into some of my work. But if my obituary says he did Doctor Who fan related, he was a professional Doctor Who fan, I would feel awful. Doctor Who is what takes me away from all of the other things of life, including work. I suppose I've just turned my hobby into a demonstrative one that I want people to look at me doing. No, I don't know. I've just taken my joy for the show and tried to communicate it. I found out stuff for my own amusement and interest, and then tried to convey that to others and sort of have found an audience. But for me, it's much more personal for me than professional Doctor Who, even though I'm doing this. But this is partially about that sort of communication, and people, seem to want to listen to what I might have to offer, and I hope I do it well. I do it to the best of my ability. But my enjoyment of Doctor Who is nothing to do with really anything I might have done, sort of in terms of work or anything like that. My enjoyment of Doctor Who is totally pure, and it's always sort of taken me away from things that are uncomfortable, taken me back to things that were comfortable, or taken me back to times that weren't comfortable, but where Doctor Who was the only comfortable things in them. I'm nostalgic about my childhood, and yet I didn't particularly enjoy my childhood. I found my childhood quite difficult. But somehow when Doctor Who was in it, it wasn't. So it makes me nostalgic for a time that was difficult, but takes away the difficult times, which is extraordinary. So it made me escape from my childhood then, and it takes me back to it now, when, of course, when as an adult you look back and go, oh, you didn't know how lucky you were. In terms of comparatively, I had a much more comfortable childhood than most people born before I was born, and most people who were born in some different parts of the world from where I was fortunate enough to be born. So but everything is relative. I have sort of covered this in a podcast recently as well, so forgive me if I'm repeating myself. But I cannot imagine my life without Doctor Who. There's not a day goes by where I don't think about some aspect of Doctor Who. That there are not things that there's still things that I would be fascinated to find out, and sometimes disappear down a wormhole trying to find out. There are podcasts that I listen to, programs that I watch, books that I read, that are all largely about Doctor Who. I've got a very one-track mind, although Doctor Who is a very broad canvas. So one day I might read a factual book about somebody that was in Doctor Who, and another day I might read a work of fiction expanding the Doctor Who universe. So I'm not one-track minded. Actually, usually let's be honest. Even as I was saying that, I was going, don't lie. I don't read much Doctor Who. I don't read any Doctor Who fiction. I read Doctor Who facts. I like researching the history of the show. That is what interests me. I like finding out about the people who were in it, the personalities, the way that things were made, all the mysteries, the things that we don't know about certain stories because we don't have the paperwork and we don't quite know how that was done, or there are things that we don't know simply because we don't know them because we don't have, that paperwork or testimony or whatever. The fact that it's so interesting to research. But mostly, it's a show that I love watching, and I have actually been watching for pleasure a bit recently, as well as doing it for these podcasts. But these podcasts give stories I know and love, on some I don't love particularly, a new lease of life, because I'm watching them with an eye to conveying enthusiasm about them. I'm watching them having consorted, albeit remotely and with a pre-record, from somebody else who I like, who I admire, who might have a different perspective, or whose personality shines through and gives a different lens through which to view something. And I think all of that is fascinating. I'm not a terribly sociable person. I can talk like this, as you could tell, 19 to the dozen. But I find social situations quite awkward. But I find talking about Doctor Who, a few ums and ers aside, for which I apologise, He says, doing an I find talking about Doctor Who easy, and I get enthused, and it makes me perhaps sort of come out of my shell a little bit more in a way that I don't necessarily hugely in public. I find this sort of socialising a lot easier because nobody here. And yet I like the people I've met through Doctor Who, and I've met some interesting, fascinating people in it. It's only when I sort of, because I'm not very good at sort of keeping in touch, even particularly so when I then touch base with somebody that I don't normally have a chat to or whatever through doing this process, it's a reminder of what an interesting and broad church Doctor Who fandom is, and how you always benefit from meeting people from different backgrounds with different perspectives who are like you in some way because they like Doctor Who, but they might like different things about it, or just give you pause for thought, or give you a new perspective, or tell you a new fact. I mean, which is all great. But beyond that, beyond the socializing, the commonality that one shares with friends and strangers who know and like Doctor Who, it's an amazing show. There's nothing like it. It's unique. It's a one-off. It's a mixture of huge ambition and sometimes under ambitious application of technology. It's a program of huge scale and scope that is nonetheless made out of the things that exist today, because what else can you do? It's a program of big ideas that and sometimes limited expression. It's a program of huge wit and great emotion that sometimes tries to convey both of those in laughably prosaic ways. But it's such a good idea. It has scope for so many things, and it's and it's fun. It never loses that. Or at its best, it doesn't lose that desire to entertain. Yes, it can do satire. Yes, it can do politics. Yes, it can try and be, try to be, intelligent and thoughtful. But its primary purpose, surely, is to entertain and be fun and exciting and frightening for kids. And if it doesn't do that, it's kind of doing it wrong, I think. And if a kid still exists inside of you, and I think we do retain our childhood selves within us, and sometimes they're quite damaged. The fact that Doctor Who still speaks to them and still puts a smile on their face is, I think, rather miraculous. And like Omega, I think we all create our world in our own image, and we all create Doctor Who in our own image. It is the thing that morphs around us like a sort of comfort blanket, but that comfort comes from different things and manifests itself in different ways. So yeah, I'll take that, Siobhan. It is slightly cheating, but I think that is acceptable on this occasion and with this story. And thank you for that, because it made me think, and then probably sound quite pretentious because really it's just it's a silly sci-fi show for kids, and yet it's obviously more than that, otherwise we wouldn't all be here. Siobhan is going to plug everything that she does, which is a few things. I mean, Siobhan's been around as long as I can remember, at fan events and in fan things, and is always very nice company, always. And Siobhan was saying she doesn't want anniversary stories to be smug. That is something that Siobhan would never be, is smug, and almost not almost self-deprecating to a fault, actually self-deprecating to a fault. But I think it's better that than to be the other way. But has brought a lot of entertainment and happiness to others herself. So let's see what she's all about in terms of pluggage and the way that she celebrates and communicates her love for Doctor Who.
Right. Okay. This is the bit where I'm allowed to plug myself for now. Okay, even though I'm completely irrelevant nowadays, I still do a couple of internet shows. They're on YouTube. You've either got the Flashing Blade Live, which is recorded live on Twitch, or Two Fan Dinosaurs, which is a similar thing to what Toby's doing, but there's two of us, myself and Dr. Sinister, not his real name. And because we're old fans, we know all the old stories, all the apocrypha, all the silly stories, and that's what you're going to get from our commentaries. We occasionally mention John Abineri. Occasionally. So, you can find us on the YouTube channel, oh dear, Bibble Thruster. Spelt like it sounds, Bibble Thruster. Oh dear. I really didn't think that through. Toby, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to do this. And thank you so much for doing these podcasts. Listening to podcasts is a busman's holiday for me, so I don't do it. But I do listen to your podcast. You're the only podcast I listen to. I just hope I stay along long enough to see you get to the end of Too Much Information. It's either that or the pickles are going to run out. So thank you again, and I'd better say goodbye. Goodbye. How do I stop this?
Thank you, Siobhan. Not irrelevant. Won't have that. Told you. Self-deprecating to a fault. That's really kind words. And Siobhan is a patron of these podcasts as well. So one of the people that ensures that they keep going and remain ad-free and mean that I can spend, proper time doing them so that they're, at least hopefully put together. I mean, I don't edit out all of the ums. I mean, there's a line. I mean, they would be better without, but hopefully that buys me time to do the too much informations, which are, much harder to put together and, written, rewritten, cross-check, double-check, blah-de-blah-de-blah. I'm trying to speed up with those. We will get there. I'm just trying to get some stability. I'm an itinerant player, so it's hard to sort of do it every time. I think, I've got a week clear that I can nobble off a whole load of too much informations. I then get, what have I had this week? A voiceover for the National Trust. That was nice. Also, I was watching an advert for an airline the other day, and I suddenly remembered. I went, aren't I the English voice on something like Eritrea Airlines or somewhere? And I'd completely forgotten about this job that I'd done. But there's an airline like one of them, where all the English instructions are me. I quite like that. Obviously I prefer it when I'm doing drama acting or comedy acting. That's my job. But I do quite like the sort of the fact that I sort of pop up in all strange places, and so I'm lucky that I have this kind of strange, peripatetic, never 2 days the same existence. But it means I can never quite get a proper pattern of organisation. So everything I do is a little bit scattergun, but I'm not sure I'd have it any other way. But it means you have to sort of bear with me when you sort of consume my stuff. But I'm grateful that it's to your taste enough that you're happy to ladle it down. Right. So thanks to Siobhan. Please do avail yourself of her broadcasts. She's again somebody that just puts the enthusiasm for the show out there, and that's kind of what it's all about, isn't it? And it is a great show. I do love Doctor Who, but I think I'm going to see if my supper's ready. Love it. I love it. Well, thanks very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock. My special guest this time around was Siobhan Gallichan, who you can find on Twitter at SIO Gallichan, SIOGALLICHON. And I'm grateful to Siobhan and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible. And they include Ruben Herfindahl, Richie Howarth, Robert Jewell, Paul Jones, Andrew Jordan, Andrew Jolly, Christopher Joyce, Jess Jerkovic, Rick King Byatt, Andy Kitching, Ashley Knight, Clive Lewis, James Lark, Lisa and Andrew, Gavin McLean, Steve Manfred, David Matthewman, Jason Mayo, Ross McPhillips, Stuart Mitchell, Nathan Moore, Ian Morgan, Christopher Newman, Matthew Newton, Graham Knott, Dave Owen, Adam Parkin, Melvin Pena, Jonathan Potter, Kevin Parker, Scott Pride, Dylan Rees, John Rivers, Mark Sandham, Jim Saxter, Keith Say, Graham Slate and David Shepardson. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you would like to join that list of names, you can go to patreon.com/Toby Haydoke. Having your name read out on the credits is just one of the perks where I acknowledge my gratitude to those who sign up for as little as £3 a month. There are higher tiers, and the enticements get slightly better, but it's largely all the same. It's a pretty egalitarian system because all of the extra material is available at that £3 tier, and for that you get bonus releases, you get advance releases, you get exclusive podcasts, one called Far Too Much Information, and a couple of times a month a AMA, where anyone can who's a patron can ask a question and I will answer it. And there's also other forms of access, including behind the scenes looks at some of the Blu-ray and DVD extras that I do, and other things that I get up to that are Doctor Who related, and sometimes bits from the comedy shows that I do as well. So that's all on my Patreon. If you want to, just occasionally pop a tip in the jar because you've enjoyed a particular podcast or because I sound particularly hungry, you can go to Ko-fi. That's ko-fi.com/Toby Haydoke. It's another way of subsidising independent artists like myself, creative content provider. I'm content provider. People who rabbit on and who you might find entertaining on a dog walk and who are cheaper than both the license fee and a subscription to Sky and all those other things. And if you want it to go straight to the horse's mouth or the content creators' coffers, so you can do that. But look, if you are happy just to sort of download and support by listening, that's more than appreciated. I'm gratified how many people out there seem to want to listen to this drivel. And if you are a listener, though, and you do enjoy it, 5 stars and a thumbs up and a like and a subscribe on Apple, iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, YouTube, all the places that you get these really, really help to make other people learn about them. I'm what could be described as a social media whore. I'm on Twitter or X, whichever you prefer to call it. But if you call it X, I will kind of judge you. And I'm there at Toby Haydoke, but these podcasts have their own special feed, which is just about the podcasts, at Haydoke Podcasts. The other one, the Toby Haydoke one, has stuff about my comedy. I do a comedy club on Tuesday nights in Manchester called Excess Malarkey. That has its own feed too, at Excess Malarkey. I'm also on Instagram at toby.haydoke. I have my own YouTube channel. These are now going out on YouTube as well, so a thumbs up and a like and a comment here and there just could really help at the moment, because it's only sort of into double figures right now, because obviously the podcasts come out elsewhere, but somebody said stick it all on YouTube as well, so I'm spreading myself around like the cyberspace whore that I am, which also means that I have a website, www.tobyhaydoke.com, and my comedy club has its own website too, accessmalarkey.com. So, if you enjoy the Doctor Who stuff, you might like some of the comedy stuff too. I don't always mention Doctor Who, but I have to be honest, I do quite a lot. I'm pretty much a one-trick pony. Well, and since I've recorded this, Laurie Webb, Mr. Ollis, has turned 100, so I'm delighted about that. I don't think he turned 100 when I recorded this. No, I'm pretty sure he didn't. And I haven't seen him since, but I have spoken to him on the phone a few times. I was filming a documentary recently which was in the vicinity. It was due to be in the vicinity, only about half an hour's drive away from where he was having his 100th birthday party, to which I was invited. But then we had to move the dates for that documentary shoot because I got a stage play job. So what looked like it might have just fitted, but it actually might have been just tantalisingly close, and I wouldn't have been able to break off from the documentary filming anyway. And then something else. Then I was filming something else, and we drove, not far from his house at all, but that was me making a documentary for something else, and we were just driving from one interviewee to another, and there was no time to sort of drop in on a 100-year-old man who had nothing to do with the shoot that my colleagues were on, so I couldn't very well steer them away. But I've been tantalisingly close. But I have spoken to Laurie a couple of times. I spoke to him on his 100th birthday. I've spoken to him 2 or 3 times since, because I do really wish to go and see him. And he's had some battles. He's had some health issues, but when Laurie has health issues, the bar is quite high. He plays golf 3 times a week, he'd fallen asleep and I think bruised himself by having an awkward lie, and he's been going in and out of he's under medical supervision. He's a 100-year-old man, but I tell you what, if I'm as that sharp and if I'm as that healthy if I make 100, not likely. Well, what a joy. And yes, he is a very taciturn fellow in The Three Doctors, but in real life he's ebullient, he's bullish, he's cheerful, and he's still got it. So I salute Laurie Webb, Mr. Ollis, and I hope as I record this his supper is very much ready. I don't know if you can hear a noise in the background. We've got this automatic Hoover because my partner's not very mobile and I can't do all the housework. So we've got a robot Hoover, but I'm grabbing this opportunity to record this while I can. So if it sounds like the universe is being rent asunder behind me, it's just the robot Hoover cleaning itself, charging itself, and probably planning to cleanse the earth of the human disease. Oh, it's stopped now. See, heard I was onto its plans.